there. I will now ask everyone to stand and join in the singing of O Canada as you're able. We are the choir this evening, so along with the music, I'd ask that you join in the singing of our national anthem. Okay, the minutes are before you in terms of the meetings from December 11th and the special meeting December 11th and January 8th. They've been moved by Councillor Etherington. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Second by Councillor Fernandez. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, there's no communications to refer to file, no presentation, so we'll go right into delegations. There are a number of delegations who are registered. I believe there may be someone here for a fence variance as well. If you're looking to be a delegation, I'd ask that you identify yourself to our assistant on the side, and she will take your information and register you to be a delegation. With that, we'll move into our first delegation, and that's with respect to the Dog Designation Appeal Committee, listed on item 2 on the Committee of the Whole agenda, Mr. Edmund Godet. And I'd like to remind delegations that they have 5 minutes to make their presentation.
Good evening. Start now? Okay. We already went through an appeal, and I got a potentially dangerous dog, and I have a hard time understanding how the dog bite ended up smaller than what the dog teeth are on my dog. There was only 2 little puncture marks, and the width of my dog teeth are fairly wide, about 1.5 to 2 inch, and her marks on her evidence for her dog bite was about 1 inch to 3/4 inch apart. So it just doesn't fit. And when she fell into my trailer after pulling my dog, and she claimed my dog bit her, she fell into my trailer. There's lots of bolts on there that she could have bluntly hit herself on the arm when she fell, because there was no blood on my dog, nothing on the sweater, and I have a picture here of my front house, and she walked directly around the whole driveway, pulling my dog, and fell into this trailer hitch. And he didn't push her like she claimed, but now that I look at the trailer and the teeth markings of her evidence, it just doesn't make sense that my dog bit her. So I would like to have my dog re-looked at and take the dangerous out of his classification, that's all. So that's my argument, that the teeth just don't mark or match up with the evidence that she produced with the, and there's no doctor report that verifies that it was a dog bite. There's just two blunt marks, one on top, two on top and one in the bottom. My dog's teeth wouldn't have folded in on the front and missed the front teeth by biting down. It doesn't make sense to me. And I love my dog, and I don't want him to be registered as a dangerous dog, because he's not. So I know I have a couple of minutes left, but I don't really have any more to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We do have some questions for you, sir.
Yep.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Ivanovic. When this incident happened, was your dog on leash or running free?
I answered the door. I thought it was my neighbor. She looked exactly like my neighbor. And when I opened the second door, the screen door, my dog was beside me, and he just casually walked out. And she started swinging at him because she's scared of dogs. When she did that, he grabbed her shirt, and that's all I remember seeing, a long shirt stretched. And it was pouring rain out, and she dragged my dog that whole path around my driveway and fell into the trailer. At that time, I was struggling to catch up to the dog. I repeatedly said, "Stop, lady, stop." He wasn't growling, he wasn't biting, he just grabbed her shirt, and she pulled him. I had no way to get back to him. So it happened at the front door.
No, I'm just having a little, I just want to get a better understanding. So you're saying that she dragged your dog, but your dog had a hold of her and she was trying to get away from your dog,
sure,
which is a natural reaction.
Which it is, but she went like that. As soon as she did that, the dog grabbed the shirt, but there was no biting involved. There's nothing. And then when she fell into the trailer, I was shocked when she said, "Your dog bit me." But he didn't, and it doesn't match up with the teeth. The marks doesn't match up with the teeth. If you can see.
Could I maybe pass that picture?
Mr. Clerk, could you, or Madam Clerk?
I don't know if that was an official doctor's picture or her daughter took it, but if you look at the bruising on her arm, it just doesn't match up with the teeth. I don't know how it would have happened.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Well, maybe you can just pass it around, actually. Yeah, I don't think we need to put it on the screen. Thanks. Next question, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Gaudette, for coming in. And
Thank you.
I have a question for you. Just in the description of all of the things that you are now required to do for the dog, including the muzzling when you walk the dog, etc. Do you have any particular problems with any of those conditions?
No.
No.
I do it for his safety. I do it.
Yeah, for his safety and for
Yeah, I realize
your
now
own...
some people are scared of dogs just in case somebody else swings at my dog, but he only does that because he thought she was playing and he
He's a
thought
playful
she was
dog.
somebody else.
Yeah, and I mean, as you recall, I was a member of the
Yeah.
Dog Designation Appeal Committee, and we heard your side and we heard the other side, and originally the recommendation, as you recall, was going to be a dangerous dog designated.
That's correct.
And then the appeal
But
committee brought that down so that it's another level down.
The only thing difference is not much different except potentially is placed in front of dangerous dogs.
I guess I'm just trying to understand, is it just the thought that your dog would be called by the city a potentially dangerous dog that you take issue with. It has nothing to do with what you're being required to do. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Netsky.
What kind of dog species is it?
It's a black lab.
And how big would the dog would be?
He's a little overweight now because he's been in the house with less walking I do with him, but he's about 35 pounds.
And that's sort of a medium-sized dog, more or less, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and how old is the dog roughly?
4.
4. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, hello, Mr. Gadet. So I know that you're referring to the puncture wounds that were in Mrs. Papadopoulos' arm, and you could be correct that based on this picture that the fang teeth may not have been what actually bit Mrs. Papadopoulos, because if I remember correctly, you may want to also let me know if you understood it that way too, that when your dog grabbed a hold of Mrs. Papadopoulos' sweater, that it could have been just his front teeth.
I thought so, but then that would be a pretty big pinch. He has, like, if you look at his front teeth, that would pinch probably the skin right off. But she just has 2 little marks. But if you look at my trailer, the front pitch.
I would just say, yeah, but just let the page pass it around and stay at the microphone so we can hear you.
Where she fell in that V shape there, right in the front, she fell right in there where her tailbone onto the ground and her head onto the one side of the V and her legs flopping onto the other side. And when she's doing this to my dog and kicking backwards, she walked backwards a good 30 feet while he's just pulling on her shirt, and I was struggling. It was pouring rain. And when she fell down, there's bolts on that front shaft where for the trailer hitch there. There's some bolts and some wires. She could have possibly hit that, had some blunt impact. Because is there a doctor that said, I didn't see no doctor report, said it was actual dog bites. But I just kind of went along with it, but this is as far as I'm bringing it to, because I still believe my dog is innocent.
And that may be your belief, but our understanding from the Humane Society, who took a look at the bite, was that it was consistent with a dog bite that they're used to seeing under the circumstances of when they look at dog bites. I mean, it's in the minutes of the meeting as well that
yeah,
they've seen dog bite incidents before.
How long has he been doing? A year, he said.
I don't, so, I mean, yeah. That's not up for issue right now. Yeah. But I think what's important is that the fear that Mrs. Papadopoulos had for your dog at the door was something that we wanted to eliminate in the future for any other person coming to your door.
I never let him out. I always keep the second door closed till he's in the room, just for some people. But I thought it was my neighbor, and she always comes at about 11 o'clock. We sit on the deck, her dog comes over, and they play. So it wasn't his fault, it was my fault, and we don't normally do that, just open the door and let him out. It does not happen, never. That was just a big accident. If she wouldn't have acted the way she did, this would have never happened. But I can't turn time.
And you may be correct, but she was very fearful, so I think we need to take that into consideration.
But I have a video on my laptop that I could show you that the dog's been laying with special need kid last summer. My wife's watching 3 kids. He's eating the yogurt and sharing with the dog. I mean, what else can I tell you?
Okay. Thank you very much for coming in.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all the questions that we have. You want to take your seat? And...
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Oh, sorry. No, okay.
All done?
No, that's it for questions. Somebody want to move the recommendation that's here? Sorry, Councillor Fernandez, you're moving it? Yes. Okay, and I have 3 speakers. Councillor Marsh?
Comment?
Yep.
Yeah, so, you know, I feel for the Gadet family. I understand that CODA is a very well-loved dog, and that the owners are taking issue just with the designation, the name, rather than the conditions. However, I think that it's important that we go ahead with the designation only because the intent is to ensure that these conditions are met, even though the owners are already meeting the conditions and there will be no change. I think that we can all agree that we cannot predict the behavior of other people when we're walking a dog, and if people who are very afraid of dogs act in an unconventional way or flail their arms, etc., that it's important that these conditions will protect those members of the public. And it's with regret that I want to uphold this designation, because I understand that that makes a change for the Gaudette family, but I think that for the betterment of the whole community, and also, nobody else. This does not make any changes for Coda. Nothing will change. The dog will still remain great with kids, very gentle, and enjoy a happy home. But we're just going to have to make sure that these conditions are met, and that's what the purpose of our committee is for.
Councillor Yanetsky.
Question to staff?
You have questions of staff? Okay, go ahead.
The staff report alludes to the designation being, I guess, downgraded from a designation of a dangerous dog to a potentially dangerous. And then there's a list of a dozen conditions approximately. What's the difference between potentially dangerous and a dangerous in terms of the outline of the conditions? Is one more onerous than the other one? And if it is, what additional conditions have been removed?
Who wants to take this? Ms. McDonald?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. Essentially, the designation that's been suggested is a lesser designation. So originally the designation they sought was for dangerous dogs, so they've adjusted it down through the committee as the recommendation to potentially dangerous. And looking at these conditions, they've imposed pretty much all of the normal ones that could be imposed, I think, in either case. But I'd also look to the members of the committee that are sitting here as to if their recollection of the discussions that day.
Councillor Fernandez?
The discussions were that we recognized that CODA probably responded in a manner that would have been typical of the dog when it was greeting somebody it was familiar with. The response of Mrs. Papadopoulos may have also caused the dog to respond the way it did. And I think the reason we went potentially dangerous was because a dog doesn't know how somebody's going to respond, and so their reaction sometimes can be different than what you would normally expect in certain circumstances. And people come to other people's doors all the time, so we wanted to make sure that not only people coming to the door, but also the Gaudette family would be protected by knowing that these are the policies we're going to be putting in place. That will also protect CODA from any future altercations with people. You know, you stated in your witness statement that you wanted to make sure that he was muzzled and makes him wear it for his own protection. And I think that's very wise and a very responsible dog ownership when you said that. Does that help? Anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
So, Councillor Fernandez, you got...
I just was going to comment on...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This was a bit of a sad situation because we saw from Mrs. Papadopoulos' demeanor and also from her body language that day that she was genuinely terrified of dogs. And no matter how friendly a dog is, if you are afraid of dogs, and even if the person who owns the dog assures you over and over and over again that, the dog is friendly, a large dog coming at you, holding on to your sweater, you're trying to get away, creates a situation that just escalates. And I think that's exactly what happened. And I think, Mr. Gadet, you're correct. It was an unfortunate accident. Nevertheless, we want to make sure that the community at large is protected and that you guys are protected by designating him as a potentially dangerous dog. So I recommend that we uphold this designation.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. So, Sir, Council has upheld the recommendation that has come out of the dangerous dog designation committee, and so the conditions associated with being a potentially dangerous dog would apply. And if you have any questions, our licensing staff as well as the Humane Society can answer those for you. Okay, thank you very much for coming in this evening. We'll now move on to Mr. Donald Roberts on stormwater management ponds.
Sir, I'm just supporting the discussion of it tonight. I have...
Okay, if you can come to the podium and just state that since you're registered, just because we're being taped and otherwise that doesn't get picked up. Thank you.
Your Worship, ladies and gentlemen, I have a strong interest in stormwater management. I have one pond, number 108, at the back of my property. I attended the presentation at Victoria Park some years ago, the master plan, and I'm impressed by the preparation, the anticipation of increased stormwater with the weather, things like that. I'm not opposing the program at all. I think stormwater management is a good program. I think what's happening, though, as it's being enforced unnecessarily, strictly and severely. There are signs posted at the around the pond that are quite aggressive. They say if you see anybody using the pond for recreational purposes, phone this number. There's a $5,000 fine. I don't think that's necessary, and I think the things that they're eliminating. The kids fish at the pond, but I could phone and get a $5,000 fine for those kids fishing. So what I'm here to sort of say is, can we work something out where the emergency function of the stormwater management ponds is there, but for times when there's not an emergency, these ponds are very good community centers, and the one at ours is near Lanark Place. The seniors come down, there's a bench there. It's a natural, in fact, it was there before the stormwater management pond. It's a kettle lake, a glacial thing. But because it's designated as stormwater management, it's not maintained. I understand there's a 10-year program that will eventually look after it. Frank Liu, another neighbor, is an expert in freshwater, and he said that pond's in the final stage of deterioration where it won't have enough oxygen to support any marine life at all. So it's just, I'd like to see some more attention made to incorporating the stormwater management ponds in the neighborhood and the community. Manage them, yes, but make them available and maintain them in a manner that supports them in a park-like atmosphere. West Heights Park is the major park. The woodlot is very well maintained beside it, but the jewel at the center is becoming a stinkhole. So that's really all I have to say, sir.
Okay, thank you. We have several questions for you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Donald, for coming forward with your presentation. And I can sense the passion that you have for your community, and I think you're looking essentially for increased benefits and recreational options that could be available in your neighborhood. And I don't disregard that. I think the city has a responsibility to take on that charge and making more options available. But the question at hand right now is stormwater ponds or stormwater facilities really being utilized as a skating rink in the winter times. That's where in my mind, the concern lies. Issues of, again, this is not just fresh water, this is collection of waters that are run off from properties and roadways, which have sediment, which causes issue of your freezing points may be different because of those sediments in that water. So it gives a lot more concern of safety issues at hand. So why go that avenue and wanting to encourage winter skating on these facilities when we already have quite a lot of options for skating in our community, indoor rinks as well as outdoor rinks? Just to speak outside, Victoria Park, and many in our neighborhoods as well.
I have to apologize. I do have a hearing challenge, but I think I can answer part of what I understood there. Our problem with this pond is neglect. It's all the things that are being said, well, stormwater ponds are fine, but this does not drain. It's a natural lake. When there's no stormwater, we still have a good lake there. But because it's called a stormwater pond, it's not being serviced. Like, it's a problem of the name on the pond. And the kind of routine maintenance, I understand, will be done in a cycle. I understand there's, from the master plan, that they will eventually clean them all up at some time. But my point is, the one we're at, 108 by Lanark Place at West Heights Park, it needs attention now. And it's not a matter of more funds or anything, it's a matter of directing them where they're needed right away.
And I think we're in absolute agreement that we do need to put more resources in maintaining our existing stormwater ponds and facilities.
But at the same time, I get very tired of hearing that fluctuation flag that flies about the danger. I've lived there for 40 years now, and I walk my dog by 3 times a day, and I've never seen a difference of more than 1 foot in the level of that pond. It's halfway up, almost at the top of a hill. I don't really see how it can function.
So no, the danger that I was referring to is a winter recreational function as a skating rink on a stormwater pond, where there's sediment and the freezing point of water is a little different. So there's more concern related to that. Because as a presentation, I think that you're making 2 points. One, which you're saying there needs to be more resources allocated to maintenance of our stormwater ponds. 10-year horizon may not be suitable to our neighborhoods. I agree with that statement. And the other that you were saying was there needs to be more a recreational function of these facilities. And I was outlining a concern with allowing winter recreational facility of skating on these ponds.
Councillor Singh, can I ask you to, I know you're trying to explain, but if you can focus on questions and not debating with the delegation.
No, I wasn't debating, I was just outlining that I'm in relative agreement with what they're saying, just kind of clarifying that point. I think they've answered my question anyway, okay. So.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts, for coming in, and I've been out at the pond that you're speaking of. Do you remember if there was ever some construction or some a new pipe that was put in that changed that pond, that Kettle Lake, from what it was to what it is now, to make it a stormwater pond?
Yes, we moved there in 1976. When the area was brand new, and at that time it was simply a body of water. The stormwater management program came later and made a connection. The Greenbow storm drains run by the north end of it, and they end up in the creek at the bottom of the Greenbelt beyond West Heights and beyond West Heights. So it was just connected into the side of an existing storm drain. And there's a gate there. But it's, as I say, it's near the top of the hill. I don't really know how much pressure it's going to take off the system. So, yes, it has existed naturally. I understand Lakeside Park is the same kind of kettle lake in our vicinity. But what I'm seeing happening here is I'm looking for two things. I think generally is a policy that's more user-friendly for the storm ponds. And the other thing I'm looking for is more immediate attention to Pond 108. I think that's really the two things that I'm trying to focus on here.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Netsky?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Just a matter of clarification, Pond 108, as you have identified it, when you refer to West Heights Park, what streets back onto, what houses on what streets back onto that pond? I'm just trying to picture exactly where that is.
Yeah, it's actually the center of kind of a radius. It's called West Heights Pond. West Heights itself is a great big horseshoe that has two ends on Highland Road. Yeah. And as it goes around the bow, West Heights Public School is there, and St. Mark's separate school is there. They have soccer fields and a wood lot, and Autumn Hill Crescent comes up, again, another smaller loop inside the West Heights loop. And we're on Winding Way, which is a crescent, and then Greenbelt comes off of Winding Way. So there's a circle at the end, all within 30 meters of the north end of the pond, and that's where the connection is made to the stormwater drain. Lanark Place is just up the top of the hill, again about 40, 50 meters. Does that help at all?
Yeah, and it helps. Now I've identified it, and I was just trying to visualize it because I recall that pond being up in the plan of subdivisions that were taking place in the 70s, and that was a natural pond already at that point in time, and the housing and subdivision built around it. And then stormwater management came in the 80s, several years later.
Yeah.
So it was, as you identified, it was a natural pond, so I would agree with you. Now I know how many changes and how much the vegetation is. I haven't seen it in years, but I know exactly what you're referring to now.
Blue Spruce is one I forgot. Blue Spruce is...
That's right. That's on the south side of the...
Autumn Hill, yes.
Yeah.
And there is a pillar there with a brass plaque on it honoring the Friends of the Pond, and it's been awarded by the City of Kitchener. So at one time, the City of Kitchener recognized that pond as a natural area.
Right.
It's been taken into the web, I guess, of the stormwater management, and that downgrading of its category has resulted in neglect and maintenance,
right.
Cleaning.
And when you're referring to blue spruce, you're not identifying the type of tree species. It's blue spruce court. There's a dead-end street that's a court that's on the south side, correct?
And they back immediately on the pond.
Exactly.
I'm the other side of the woodlot from Winding Way coming down.
I remember being here years ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Roberts, thanks for coming in. I'll try to speak up, okay?
Thank you.
I'm a little confused here. Are you in favor of seeing people skating on this stormwater pond?
Oh, yes. In a good winter, a lot of people clear it up and shovel it by hand, and it's a very attractive winter ice place, despite its illegality.
Okay. And how deep do you estimate the water is there on average?
Well, I have no idea. That's glacial features. I'm sure the city could find out how deep it is. They have the equipment. We have some snapping turtles that they manage to survive there, and they get to a good size, and they can go to pretty good depths too.
And when people shovel off the ice, that's just with shovels, not with
no equipment, no.
Mechanized equipment.
Just shovels, right?
Have you ever seen people go through the ice?
No. It's. I've seen kids try it out in the morning, but they're very careful, and they're very light too. But that's what kids do.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Don, for coming in. And I know your concern with the pond has been raised with me on several occasions, and I don't disagree with your concern about the pond. And just to give a little bit of a context with the pond was dredged sometime in the 80s, and at that time it went down about 10 feet. So before that, prior to that, it was literally about 1.5 to 2 feet deep at most. Because of that, the designation of a Kettle Lake and all that during that time, it never really got placed in the system accurately. And prior to that, it was sort of the way staff was managing it at the time was more or less through memory rather than documentation on that. So now with the implementation...
Can we get to the question, Councillor Ioannidis?
With the implementation of the stormwater pond. So my question is, staff had a consultant, an expert in the stormwater field, analyze that pond. And from their perspective, the pond is not as bad as what you're saying it is. So how are we supposed to navigate that when there's other ponds, stormwater facilities that are in worse shape, and skip the queue on that one?
I'd suggest your expert talk to Frank Blue, who is an expert. He lectures in water quality at the university, and he's also a co-founder of the Huron Natural Area. I think Frank's credentials are very high. And Frank talks that there are 3 stages in deterioration of fresh water, and that this pond is at the 3rd stage. So my expert...
I don't question
Mr.
Glue's expertise, but what I'm suggesting is what the stormwater pond from what our consultant is not as bad as what.
But that's exactly my argument. By calling it a stormwater pond, you change all the parameters on the thing. If you recognize it as a natural body that is a function as a stormwater pond, then the category for maintenance and care is much better. But it's that label that's causing the trouble.
So you prefer it not to be called a stormwater pond?
I definitely do. You can say Kettle Lake, alias, or part-time stormwater management pond.
Okay. Thank you, Don.
Okay, those are all the questions we have. Thank you very much for coming in this evening, Mr. Roberts. Heather McQuaig, our next delegation. Welcome, Ms. McQuaig.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here representing some of the neighborhood from Topper Woods Crescent. I've been a resident on Topper Woods for the past 10 years and highly involved in our neighborhood. So I know there are a lot of other issues that will be coming forward tonight around the use of storm management ponds for skating. I'm speaking perhaps more on a community base. Our neighborhood belongs to the Festival of Neighborhoods, and we have participated every year since we've moved there, organizing street parties and community cleanups. And so we do a significant community cleanup every spring. We have usually 40, 50 people come out 2 hours at a time, and we begin at the Topper Woods Pond behind our neighborhood and work all the way down to New Dundee Road. Very committed to our neighborhood. Very committed to building a sense of community in our neighborhood. We're very proud of that. As a result, we know most of our neighbors. So involved in that also then is the storm management pond for use as a skating rink. And it brings it sort of serves that philosophy of building our community in our neighborhood. And so we have several people that come out every winter and skate. We have children who have never skated before. We have kids who are age 3. We have teenagers, young adults, and they all play together. And it is just building that community, having new immigrants move in, never skated before. And again, it just really builds that sense of community in our neighborhood. And so that's the piece that I'm personally speaking from, is more about how it builds that community, supports our philosophy in our neighborhood. And that's a real key piece to that pond.
Okay, thank you. We have some questions for you, Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Heather, for coming in. You've been living there for over 10 years, and have, in your recollection, has this pond been used as a winter recreation rink for that entire length of time?
Every year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has there ever been any problem with nets sinking into the pond or sticks sinking in the pond? Or is the community at large very vigilant about all of those products and those equipment, getting it cleared off before it's
Generally,
just...
yes. The odd time we've had a very quick thaw, but we've actually gone and gotten out, that would only happen once, a piece of a net. But, and we've pulled bikes out of there in the summertime. Like, we care for this pond. This is not something, like, we clean it up all year round. We ensure there's no garbage in the water. Like, we literally fish. If kids have thrown pop bottles in, we take it out. We want it to look nice. We care about it. There's frogs, there's turtles, there's geese. It's important to us. And, if there's ever a time that kids are out there and they shouldn't be, we speak to them. We go outside and speak to them. From a safety perspective, but no, there's never been a time where someone's gone through it, and it's been used every winter.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Bavena. Heather, thank you so much for coming in, and thank you especially for the great work that you're doing in your neighborhood. It's part of what makes our city great and unique. And I love the neighborhood aspect of what goes on at this stormwater facility. I just want to know if there was a rink that was created in the same area, would that serve the same purpose if there was a rink that was put down and maintained, and would that help?
I'd certainly give that some thought. I think it's a good idea. I think it's worth discussing. It needs to be somewhere that's close, because the kids that go there aren't being dropped off by parents. They are all congregating, they show up, they throw their sticks down, they pick their teams. It's classic Canadian hockey, or kids skating around. So it needs to be a place where kids can congregate and not have to be driven somewhere. We're not going to take our kids somewhere and drop them off and wait, and it's very convenient. And so it just matters that people just come and go as they please. So I think there's a real benefit to that. Mm-hmm. So I think certainly entertaining something in the neighborhood is worthwhile discussing, but something accessible and fairly close to get to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Actually, that was the question that I was going to touch on, that Councillor Schneider focused on seeing, is there a lack of that amenity? Do we need to have more outdoor skating rinks? That's the question at hand. That's really what I'm looking at this, out of this conversation. If our residents are, and again, my concern is still for aspect of safety, are willing to take a certain level of risk on wanting to skate on these ponds, that maybe goes to show that there's a strong need of outdoor skating rinks. Would you say that's...
It's interesting because, like, speaking practically, and I mean, I'm like, the natural pond exists. It's been very safe. We always check it as parents before our children go on there. So to me, it's like, it's there, it's practical, let's just use it. Can we find a way to make it work rather than building something new that has to be maintained and it has more costs associated with it? But that's just practically speaking. I don't have the other knowledge around the risk and all that kind of thing, but
does the risk concern you, though, as a safety aspect of it?
No, I am absolutely not. And I have young kids. And when we moved there, that was one of the concerns, was having a body of water behind us, and we never once had a problem.
So how would you see that program maintained if the city, there was a more formal allowance of winter, I guess as a winter activity for skating on these ponds? I guess the city would have to do ongoing monitoring of the thickness of the ice and having someone on site. Do you see that?
Well, one of our delegates here tonight is also going to speak on that, so I'm wondering if Brett would be better posed to speak on that, because he's done a lot more research on that and has more information than I do. Personally, if he could respond to that, I think that would make
I'll look forward to seeing what they say.
Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
You've lived in the area for 10 years, right? Have you seen any real issues over that 10-year period?
Never. I've only seen really cool things with young and old kids playing together and people choosing teams that are fair and parents going out there with brand new skaters skating on the ice, and it's been very positive.
What's the worst thing you've seen over 10 years?
The garbage. Like, seriously. the recycle that blows into the neighborhood and makes it look dirty, like, and you know, just pollutes the pond, and we clean it up. That's the worst thing I think I've seen in 10 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Just one question that I have. Has the neighborhood ever approached the city about having a group of people to have a neighborhood rink?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Great, thank you. Those are all the questions we have.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. Mr. Brett Mulligan. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thanks to Heather for speaking for me. I'm not going to go through everything that Heather touched on, certainly all very relevant points. My family's been on Topper Woods next to Heather and her husband Rob for 6 to 7 years now. And as she suggested, there's never been an incident. There's never been additional risk associated with being on the pond. In fact, it's one of the reasons we purchased our home. Both my kids play rep hockey, and they love hockey, but they love skating on the pond more than like playing with the teams they have. And they're great teams, great teammates, but they cherish the time they spend on the pond. It's the first thing my son asks me come October, November when the weather starts getting cold. And he's sad to see it go every year. So interesting, one of the questions was, what's one of the worst things that we've seen? One of the worst things I've seen actually is the city coming to wreck that pond deliberately. In terms of some of the points that Heather had touched on, sense of community, like she suggested, we've had groups of people there from all ages. They come to get together, they meet new friends, they build relationships. It is very much a sense of community, that pond. I think one of the points was, would putting up a pond in our neighborhood, be a good replacement for it? And I actually don't think it would be. The point behind that is that the proximity and the access to that pond for the families in our neighborhood is very much what makes it part of our community. The kids come through my yard. We serve hot chocolate. We tie up skates. We're there, as opposed to a lot of the parks that you guys have created, or that the city's created, bike parks, skate parks, all unsupervised, all unmaintained, garbage floating around, no supervision. This pond is very much supervised by the parents that back onto it and the parents that send their kids there to play. So in terms of safety, for those of you that are concerned about safety with regards to the pond, this is actually a much safer environment than a lot of the parks we've created in our community, including McLennan Park, the skate park there, the bike park there, all of which are unsupervised and used at your own risk. There's quite a significantly less degree of risk because of the people that maintain the pond, watch the kids play on it and make sure that it's safe. As Heather suggested, 10 years for their family, more for some, 7 for mine. Never an incident. I personally take care of the pond for the kids. I'm out there daily. I'm the first one on the ice in the spring. I'm the last one off the ice. First one on the ice in the fall, last off in the spring. And on many occasions, we've cautioned kids, you can't be on the ice. It's not thick enough. It's not ready. So I think, Councillor Singh, I think one of your points was around maintenance. I'd be happy to take that on. I'd be happy to measure ice depth. I'd be happy to take on any of those accountabilities, and I'm sure there'd be many more in my neighborhood that would do it if it meant we could keep our pond and skate on it. In terms of some other points I wanted to mention, options, there are other areas. City of Saskatoon does this. There's 9 stormwater management ponds that are actively in use and endorsed by the city. Signage and communication to skaters about using at your own risk is how they ensure the safety of it. Fire departments measure depth. So again, not something I'm suggesting the city or the taxpayers pay for. I'm sure there's many of us, including myself, that would be happy to volunteer to do that. Grenadier Pond in Toronto is used for the same purpose. So part of what I wanted to suggest to the City Council to consider is there's many options out there to manage the liabilities and the risks that are perceived, though I don't think there's any more risk to these. In fact, considerably less than some of the parks that we put up They're unsupervised, but there's plenty of options, including additional signage, employing volunteers like myself and other community members to continue to ensure that these are safe ponds to skate on. And the final point I'll mention is in terms of building skating rinks. The pond is something that is natural. It freezes despite the fact that you don't have snow. There's been many years in the time I've been there where there hasn't been enough snow to build a rink, but there's always been enough cold weather to actually freeze the ice safely. So building a rink and you know, traveling 4 blocks only to realize there's not enough snow to actually skate is a pretty big letdown, especially when you have one in your backyard. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. We have some questions for you.
Sure.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks for coming in, and thanks for the years that you have been giving of your time to this community to see kids enjoy a winter rink. Despite the illegalness of it, as staff will tell you, what you've provided is community, and one of the things that we speak so highly about with our neighborhood strategy. During the years that you have been monitoring this rink, Heather said that nothing tragic has happened. You haven't lost any equipment. Nobody's fallen through the ice. How are you measuring this ice?
To be honest with you, it's nothing. It's nothing scientific. I'm heavier than any kid in my neighborhood that I've seen in the years I've been there to go on there. I'm always the first onto the edge. I'll use a long. I've got an icebreaker. I'll use a long icebreaker to sort of feel out the ice before I go on it. I'll use a spider web in a walking pattern to make sure its thickness. I know where the inlets and outlets are, although the flow, I have to argue that there is any flow out of that pond because it's continually full to about a depth of about 3 to 4 feet. So it's manual means really. I'll walk the pond before I let the kids on it, and I'll do that when I know that there's been warmer weather as opposed to cooler weather.
So you spoke about the outlet, that water is coming into the pond. You indicated that it's rare that you see water coming in. We've had a lot of rain in this month already.
Fair. When it rains, yeah, you'll see that the volume will increase. You very rarely, unless you get a drought in the summer, do you see the actual water decrease. So, I mean, the rain we got in the winter, it's tough to tell just how much volume that is because it doesn't flow in like it does in the summer when it's not frozen.
So would you say it's less active in the winter season?
Significantly less active, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Brevenick, and thank you for coming in, and thank you for doing what you're doing in your community. And I don't think anybody wants to lose any of that. You talk about the rink situation. My hope is that we can look into getting some good, safe rinks. But with this, I just want to know that if you were made to be 100% responsible for any liability, and anyone who used that rink would be 100% liable, and the city would not be responsible for anything that would happen that would be unpleasant. Are you okay with that?
Well, I would suggest why that would be necessary when we have unsupervised parks throughout the rest of the city. Why would you make one person liable? The city's not liable for risks and injury at current parks. Why would you make a resident liable for that?
Well, because this is a stormwater facility that it's not a true pond, so there are some issues that our staff have informed us of that can affect the safety of the ice on it. So, as I say, this is where I'm in a bit conflicted because I love to see the outdoor winter activity. I'm one of those kids that did play on the rinks and shoot the sticks to both sides and play exactly like you're doing, and it's pure Canadian, and I don't want to lose that. I just want to make sure that it's safe. So this is where, as a city, we're some of us are concerned about the whole safety of it. So.
Fair enough, yeah. So, I mean, I can't say that I'm willing to take on all of the liability for this on behalf of the city. I'd suggest that that's probably not necessary. Like
I would mean like personally.
However, I think that you'd find all of the folks in our neighborhood, and I would suggest probably throughout the city, would would be willing to take that on at their own risk, such as they do when they skate or they bike or they toboggan within the city on parks that have been created by the city and are unsupervised. I think anybody would be willing to take on that same amount of risk.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Yanetsky.
Thank you for coming in and presenting a rather detailed analysis, and then through questioning you described how you approach the pond in terms of making sure it's safe. This past winter we've had some warm spells for several days, and of course ice would melt, snow is melting. How have you monitored the conditions of that, and was there a period of time during December or January where you said, hey, wait a second, it's kind of mild, we've stopped skating until it gets colder again? Has those situations unfolded for you to consider?
100%. I back onto the pond. I live within about 60 feet from the edge of the pond. Like I said, we're avid hockey players and skaters. We're constantly watching the pond to see what the condition of it is. We clear it so we can see what the condition of the ice is. We have a good sense as to where it's thickest. It never really does get thin, like I said, and we're constantly watching it because we back onto the pond. There's been a number of situations where not only myself but other neighbors have suggested and cautioned kids, today's not a good skating day, guys. It's not thick enough. It may look like it is, and it probably is thick enough, but it's wet. It's better you just stay off of it. And the beauty of our neighborhood is that the kids and the families respect that because they know they take care of it. It's a sense of it's a sense of community, and it's a piece of their neighborhood, and they're willing to respect that. So there's been situations like that, and they're very respectful. Thank you very much, and they'll come back another time. Like I said, back there, I watch it constantly, as do our other neighbors that back onto that pond.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Councillor Gazzola.
You've been there 7 years, I think you said. Over that 7-year period, what kind of winters have we had?
We've had, I can't think of a year where we haven't skated on it. There's been years where we haven't had plenty of snow, as I suggest, which is one of the difficulties of having outdoor rinks. I've built outdoor rinks, and I know you need snow to make them, and if that doesn't happen, you don't have a rink. Even in situations like that, the ice has been plenty thick. There's certainly been seasons where we've had shorter skating seasons, obviously, than others. But again, we're all diligent parents. Safety's first, and we keep an eye on the ice surface, and we just don't let our kids on it when it's not up to what we consider to be good for skating.
So regardless of the weather, and the weather has changed in the last 10 years to when I was young, 20 years ago, but you've still had a lot of use from that rink.
Plenty, yeah, plenty. Actually, this winter, actually, most specifically over the Christmas holidays, the weather was really cold, and we had a good 2 weeks there until the city broke it up. So yeah, there's certainly seasons. I'd say the seasons are probably shorter, but I do think that we get plenty of cold weather to freeze the ice well thick enough to be used safely.
Yeah, how many neighborhood families would you say that are right in the proximity that use that rink now?
Oh, I'd say probably 85% of our Crescent do. There's other families that I know, some of which are here tonight, that live within blocks that are good friends of ours, that they come from blocks away. It's not uncommon to have a party of about 40 or 50 kids and adults out skating together. So, yeah, plenty.
Now, a number of councillors here keep mentioning putting in some new rinks. Do you know, is there any area out there where you would see that a man-made rink would fit into and be as convenient or as good as what you have now?
No, there's no place that you can build a rink within a kilometer from where we live on our Crescent. Not within a kilometer. And to be fair, my kids have skated on that pond since they've been 4 years old. Now, obviously, at 4, you're not skating very well, so mom and dad are out there with you. But at 7 or 8, I can watch my kids from my back window. I can supervise my kids from their back window. I can ensure fair play from my back window. So no, even if you were to put up a rink within a kilometer's radius, albeit there would be other families closer to that rink that would probably use it, it would still be very much dependent on the weather and the snow to make sure that it's actually feasible to skate on. But I don't think that would be a I don't think that's the desired
Thank you.
alternative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mulligan, for your comments. It sounds like a very idyllic situation with the pond in the backyard, and I'm just, I would love to be able to have a pond in my backyard to be able to use that, and I'm sure many would. Here's my question. I wonder what would be your response to those members of this council or of the community at large that recognize, hey, in certain situations like yours, where your neighborhood you have diligent, safety-conscious adults who are supervising every time kids are skating. What would you say if we were to open up skating to be allowed at your own risk at all of our stormwater ponds, which we have hundreds of? What about the safety concerns? Because I mean, when you have a skate park or the McLennan tobogganing hill, the kids are at their risk of breaking their arm or even a leg. But drowning in a pond would be the ultimate horrible, worst nightmare of any parent. Ultimate's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. It would just be the worst. And I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to grapple with that safety issue, because when we come down to it, there are going to be kids who are so excited to go skating on a pond, and there's no adult to supervise them. And what happens then?
Yeah, so I'm not suggesting that you open up all of your stormwater management pond. If you take a look at the city of Saskatoon, they've opened up 9. Likely because they're monitored, they're checked for ice and safety. So I'm not suggesting that you open up every stormwater management pond, but for the ones, and there are many that I know are maintained and there's diligence around them, I think there's an opportunity to open those up.
What about the concern about the life or death situation?
I don't see it being any different than me jumping on a skateboard at 40 years old and going skateboarding and breaking my neck. That's unsupervised, and it's been endorsed and put there by the city. So, I mean, I'll give you a great example. The city plans these neighborhoods and puts stormwater management ponds in them as an open body of water. As a family that moved there when I had 2- and 3-year-old kids, where was the liability there about my kid drowning then? At that time, and still, that sign is obviously enough mitigation for the city. And now we're talking about the fact when the ice is frozen, there's more risk. I find that very hard to believe. Okay. So, those are planned stormwater management ponds. I would suggest that the city start planning for the use of those more effectively when they build them, because the liability of an open body of water in the summer is much worse than the liability of a broken piece of ice.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And sir, I appreciate you coming in and outlining your perspective, and I'm on the fence on this so far. I haven't really made up my mind which way to go with the motion that's going to be coming forward by Councillor Fernandez in allowing our staff to look at feasibility of skating on our stormwater ponds. And I'm trying to find the balance within what your perspective. You've outlined as a good parent, you obviously monitor your kids' activity. If they're in the backyard, in the winter they're playing on the ice, you want to ensure that the thickness and the safety is there. The question isn't of just your kids alone. So because the pond itself is in close proximity to your residence, is there a parent or an adult that's constantly monitoring the site 7 days a week throughout the day?
I'd say pretty close to that. I'm on the pond quite a bit with kids that aren't my own. I'm out there cautioning kids to not be on the ice if I don't feel it's safe when they're not my own. Is it 7 days a week? No. But I'd also argue that the parks you've built that are just as dangerous are unsupervised at all times.
So I appreciate that, sir. We manage and maintain our parks. There's a certain level of safety that's administered as to how our facilities are maintained.
Right.
The ponds are not as such. The ponds are not made for it to be a recreational facility. It's a collection of body of stormwater runoff.
Right.
So you're trying to relate the two the same, but are they really the same?
I think they are, actually. Yeah, I do. So, I mean, what's another meaning for unsupervised, I'd ask you? You say that the city is maintained and they're there to be diligent about the use of those parks. What is your definition of unsupervised?
No, it's not about unsupervised. It's about the maintenance of the facility.
No, it's not. It's about unsupervision. You're talking about risk. It's nothing to do with the maintenance of it. The maintenance. So we've already talked about this. Our neighbor talks about the fact that we maintain that pond. I can't remember the last time I've seen the city coming clean around the pond, but we've done it yearly for 10 years. So it's not about maintenance. That's not even an issue here because the neighborhood maintains the cleanliness, the upkeep of the pond. We ensure safety in our neighborhood. I haven't seen the city do that quite a bit in our neighborhood. It's about supervision. It's about risk. That's what your question was about. So define for me what supervision is or unsupervision and how that's different.
So I think that's going to be a good question related to staff, and that's a question I'm going to have of what would be required by us if we were to allow this type of activity. What type of risk is it to the pond as a facility, as a damage, if we were to allow, skating on it or, more active activity around the stormwater pond. So I'll relay that question, and it'll help to bring me to a decision as to how to support the motion. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming in.
Problem.
Lots of questions. Could you tell me this past weekend, what was the condition of the ice on that pond?
Very wet, puddling. To be fair, they did maintenance on our pond this past week, so somewhat drained, and the edges have been broken up, but that was all intentionally done by the backhoe that came in. So it's tough to say, but had they not been there, I would have suggested that the ice would have been plenty of thick to skate, but very wet, and probably not ideal for skating.
Yeah, I was going to ask because I live on the edge of Victoria Park, and I walked through and there was nothing left of the rinks at the weekend. But you feel that people could have skated on your ice if...
You could be on the ice safely, probably, had they not come to do the maintenance. I would have cautioned and suggested that nobody go on. Part of the maintenance around the pond is more to make sure that it's available and it's in a state that is fun for the kids, and that's part of the reason why we maintain it. It's about safety first, but it's also about you want the pond to be in good condition. So there's been times where I've even suggested to kids, you could skate on it, it's plenty thick, but to be fair, it's mild enough that you're just going to ruin the ice, and tomorrow when you want to skate and it freezes again, it's going to be no good to you. So no, I would have suggested they wouldn't have skated on this week, and I would have made that suggestion to anybody that came along. It would have been too wet.
Okay. And while I appreciate your attention to that ice and the neighborhood's attention to the ice, it sounds fantastic. Used to be fantastic in Victoria Park years ago, on the main lake when thousands of people used to skate. But I've also seen equipment go through the ice, literally through the ice, but that's fairly heavy equipment. What would you do, or have you encountered any incidents where kids come in from outside of the area and don't pay any attention to your warnings and still go skating if the ice is in bad shape? Have you had that?
To be fair, I can't say I have. I'd say most of the people that come and skate on the pond that we have, they know that the pond is maintained. They know that it's a good place to skate because of word of mouth, and they're friends. There's many people that probably still don't know that it's a well-maintained pond, but the ones that do come, they respect that. They're there because they're mutual friends with folks from the neighborhood, and they know that it's kept up well. It's possible that it could happen, but I've never had a situation where I've cautioned somebody not to be on the ice and they've completely disregarded it or given me a hard time about it. And I have to believe that is likely because we do maintain it, and we do want it to be there for the kids to use for the duration of the winter months when it's appropriate.
And personally, I've phoned the cops about kids on the lake in Victoria Park because I've been worried about the fact they're out there. Believe me, after tonight, you'll have lots of newcomers that you like. Thanks.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, those are all the council questions we have. Mr. Mulligan, I just have a couple, and I too want to thank you and the residents who have been so engaged and involved in the neighborhood, because it truly does speak to what we're trying to create throughout the city in terms of neighborhoods. In listening to, you describe the level of attention and so on, do you think that this is sort of a level of attention that exists within your neighborhood that exists, quite frankly, in every neighborhood around a stormwater pond, or do you have something pretty unique in your area?
No, I think there's several. I know of others, albeit in the Dune South area, because that's where we live. I know others down there that get the same attention for the same reasons. Proximity, ease of accessibility, and I know there's more.
Okay, and as a parent, if you were aware that we've had situations where kids have gone through the ice and so on, would that change your attitude around these ponds and the risk that exists around them?
No. I mean, as a parent of two kids, 9 and 12, and having had them on the pond when they were younger than that, it's part of the parent's responsibility where it says to use it at your own risk. You're taking that risk on when you do it. And like I said, most of my time is spent at the start of the season making sure that it's thick enough and doing that continually through the season. So no, if that were to happen anywhere in the city, as unfortunate as that might be, that wouldn't change my outlook on the use of the pond in our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ioannidis, you have some questions?
No, my question's for staff.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions we have, sir.
Thank you.
Before we take questions of staff, I thought it'd be good for staff to make any comments that they might have. So, probably Mr. Reedman.
Through the mayor, so the city has 154 stormwater management facilities. As many know, these are engineered facilities that have four main factors that are concerns related to safety. So the first one is water levels in stormwater management facilities can change underneath the ice due to the location of drainage outlets. Some ponds have them at the very bottom of the facility. So the inlets could be frozen over and the bottom could continue to drain out, leaving an air gap between ice and the water, creating a safety risk. Unlike natural rivers, ponds and streams, swim facilities can have multiple inlets that allow the flow of high chloride or contaminated water into them, which are designed to melt ice specifically, so they can create weakness in the ice in different points in the facility. So people that are not familiar with a facility may not know where those inlets and outlets are, creating a danger of falling through. There are freeze-thaw cycles where warm heated snow off the roadway goes in, creating flows through the ice, which can create fluctuations in ice thickness from day to day. And then if there are debris that is left on the ice, like hockey nets, sticks, and boards, they can fall through the ice, and we have to take special equipment in, like floats, to actually retrieve that equipment, and they can block the outlets, causing flooding risk for the neighborhood in the spring if we don't get in and remove those accesses. There have been a number of studies, and there's best practices around using natural bodies of water for skating on. There's been a 2-year study going on in the city of Edmonton by the University of Alberta by a prof in the civil and environmental engineering that has been studying the condition of ice for 2 years, and the recommendations are exactly what I've stated in the risks that are outlined, that these facilities are highly variable and are not consistent with natural water bodies, which create an elevated safety risk. The the National Capital Commission in Ottawa, as many people know, has skating on the Rideau Canal. They spend $1.85 million annually on ice testing alone. And in 2006, sorry, I've just lost my train of thoughts. I'll talk about a different example first. So in the city of Toronto, in December 2006, 2 boys aged 11 and 15 died after falling through the ice on a stormwater management pond. In the city of Kitchener in 2014, 2 children fell through the ice in a stormwater facility and were treated for shock and hypothermia. The city of Markham has did some ice testing on the Two Good Pond, which is a natural water body, but also now takes in chloride contaminated water from roadways. And they paid $155,000 for 1 year of ice testing on that facility to make sure that it was safe for recreational use, and discontinued the practice based on the cost and return. So now they are providing a flooded rink in a nearby location. In the City of Ottawa, on the Rideau Canal example that I've provided, even with $1.85 million of spending on ice testing, a person fell through the ice a couple years ago, and that's monitored 24/7, 7 days a week. So there is risk even with ongoing active monitoring at facilities.
Okay, thank you for that overview. I think it's helpful. We have several questions of staff. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To be honest, I had a number of questions of staff, but with everything that Mr. Reedman has said, it just clarifies the evident danger in allowing winter activity on these ponds. So outside of everything that you've explained, they are city facilities that have a specific function. One of the delegations mentioned that could be upwards of 30 to 40 people. When you have that type of activity on these ponds, does that create damage to the overall facility as well? Is there concern for that outside of all the other concerns already outlined?
Through the Mayor, the number of people on the ice surface can create additional weight pressures on the ice, so that can be a variable factor in it as well as the changing ice conditions.
And
Councillor Singh, can you just speak to into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. So one of the delegations really focused on our existing recreational facilities where we may not have someone monitoring 24-hour usage or how the usage may be. But these parks, playgrounds, McLennan Park was referenced, at Toboggan Hill, these are maintained by staff ongoing, are they not?
Through the Mayor, that's correct, and they're designed to minimize the amount of risk. So if you look at McLennan Park, Toboggan Hill, staff go out and inspect that facility, put hay bales where necessary. We don't permit tobogganing in forested areas where there's inherent risk, so that would be similar to how we have a sanctioned ice rink program. We have 38 outdoor rinks in the city of Kitchener that are deemed safe. They're on ground and they're flooded. There's water hookups and electrical connections near most of them. And that's a sanctioned recreational activity with a known amount of risk. There's risk in pretty much anything we do, but this is an uncontrollable safety risk that is highly variable, and that's the difference.
Do we have pools that are open for public that don't have lifeguards, and we just go with the mindset the parents will look after their kids and it's the parents' responsibility? Open body of water where...
Through the Mayor, anywhere where we have recreational swimming, we have requirements for lifeguards. If you think about even the work we're doing on Carl's Air Square, the depth of that water surface to allow it to be publicly accessible has to be under a certain threshold, which is an inch or so.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey. Sorry, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Davies next. My apologies.
Thank you, Mayor Vanovic. I'm wondering if we've done any research into outdoor rinks that would be more of I would say, a bladder-based design where the ice and snow could melt during a thaw, but the water stays in the bladder area of the pool and can freeze up again.
Through the Mayor, so we are looking at the design of new parks to make sure that there's a heated water hookup and electrical connection by them, as well as the design of the park to create a bit of a basin to create outdoor rinks in new communities as those parks are being developed.
That's great to hear, because what we're hearing here tonight, I think, is just great natural neighborhood organic community building. And I wouldn't want to lose that. My concern is that it's done safely, so to have the hydro and the water hookups. Have there been any studies, or do we have maybe a ballpark idea of what it might cost to have water hookups and hydro hookups at some of our parks and areas that could accommodate a rink? Because I think the value of the outdoor skating and the community building it brings is worth it.
Through the Mayor, so a new design park, it's relatively cost effective because we can design it in. We would have to look at a case-by-case basis for each individual location to see what that cost would be to bring a water connection, electrical connection in a suitable location for retrofitting areas.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Just one question, Mr. Reedman. I'm not sure if you mentioned it specifically in your initial brief, but can you comment on whether one of my concerns was the declining requirement of temperature when water is exposed to sediment, salt, etc., in terms of the freezing point. Do you have any data that's on that? Like, I guess my concern is, some of these stormwater ponds they'll have road salt runoff, for example, and therefore the salt content will reduce the absolute freezing temperature.
Through the mayor, so I don't have specific information with me. It does impact the quality of the density of ice, and so that's the findings that the University of Alberta have found through their study, is that stormwater facilities are inherently more dangerous because of the chloride contaminated water that's going into them. So it's not just about the thickness of the ice, it's also about the ice density. So when you have high salt water coming in, it can create layers of unstable ice in between good, clear, solid ice.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Etherington.
Did you forget me?
You're not clicked in. Oh, you are, sorry. I don't know how you got clicked in, but anyway, go ahead, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. Okay, the question that I'm looking at, and I'm not sure, Mr. Reedman, you can answer this one, but what's the risk to the city if when we have the signs posted, you skate at your own risk? Like, I'm trying to grasp the difference in this when if some kid was just skateboarding and fell on the sidewalk. Like, I'm trying to figure out what the difference is here.
I'll maybe ask Ms. McDonald to comment, but I suspect we're starting to get into legal advice, which might require us to go into camera.
Yes, I would suggest, Your Worship, that in fact, if we're going down that path of questioning, that we should probably have a discussion in caucus first.
I would like that.
Okay. So you're moving that we go into camera?
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Davey. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we'll go into camera and we'll be back in a few minutes. Councillor Ioannidis, you had the floor. Any further questions?
No, I have no further questions. Thank
you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola is out of the room right now. Councillor Etherington.
No, Mr. Mayor, mine's been covered, thanks.
You've been covered? So Councillor Gazzola indicated he's just coming, so Councillor Gazzola, do you still have questions? You were next in the queue. Okay. Councillor Gazzola.
I had a number of questions that I asked when we first got into this. I just want to go back to the question. We have 110 ponds. Are all 110 the same?
Mr. Reedman, first of all, I think the number was 154.
Well, 154.
Okay.
Through the mayor, that is correct. There's 154 ponds, and they're all designed differently.
So they're all different.
Some are for quality, some are for quantity, and they're all different shapes and sizes. Some have access that's easy to get to them, some don't. Some have multiple inlets. Some have only a couple inlets. They're all designed differently based on the context of the location.
How many ponds would we have had 10 years ago?
Through the mayor, I don't have that information with me.
Is there a big difference today than there was 10 years ago?
Through the mayor, that is correct. New portions of the city have stormwater ponds designed when they're developed. The older part of the city, so about 75% of our city does not have stormwater controls at all, and that tends to be the older parts of the city.
I had another question, but I will leave it. Thank you.
Okay. So I have just a couple questions, Mr. Reedman. And I just want to be absolutely clear on things. Have we had experience in the city where city equipment has gone through the ice?
Through the mayor, I believe city equipment has gone through the Victoria Park Lake location. We've had private equipment go through the ice, so boards and lighting, and we also had 2 youth that fell through one of our stormwater ponds in 2014.
So 2 young people actually fell through the ice?
Correct, and they suffered hypothermia and shock as a result of that.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I have. That would be it. So Councillor Fernandez, you had a notice of motion.
Yes.
Or not a notice, but a motion you wanted us to consider tonight as part of the strategic action plan?
That's correct. So it is on everybody's desk because in the agenda it did refer to that I wanted to speak to the use of stormwater management ponds for stormwater management ponds, winter for recreation activities.
Okay, so actually before you do that, I think procedurally I should probably ask Councillor Davey to bring forward that recommendation from Special Finance and Admin Committee. And then we'll come to you for the amendment. Councillor Davey?
Yes, it's under unfinished business, so it's with reference to the strategic action plan. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dave Schneider.
Okay. Thank you. Now back to you, Councillor Fernandez.
Okay. So I'm going to read the entire motion because of the public that's here. Whereas the neighborhood strategy promotes great cities being made up of great neighborhoods where people work together to make the community a safe, thriving, and welcoming place to call home. And whereas residents are being encouraged to be part of the movement to improve their community, to take advantage of the programs, opportunity, and resources available to them. And whereas the city has made a commitment to endeavor to support them along the way, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to review the use of stormwater ponds for winter recreational activities and report back to council on the feasibility of creating a policy around winter use. And if I can just elaborate that on a little bit more. We've heard from a number of delegations tonight about the impact that a stormwater management pond ice rink has had in building community. We've also heard from our staff on the number of issues, concerns, liabilities, and risks. I'm not asking really that we allow winter rink activities on every single one of our stormwater management ponds. Mr. Reedman just identified that we have a wide variety. Every single one of these ponds are different. And I think that with the combined effort between our community and maybe our fire department, whatever our staff is able to research, that we may be able to build some partnerships. Yes, we do have winter rinks, but those winter rinks disappear pretty quickly when we have a few inclement days. And I think that was one of the discussions I had with Mr. Mulligan, is he stated so often that that rink that he has behind him on that stormwater management pond / facility lasts way longer than the rink at the community center. And yes, we have had volunteers who have asked to put winter rinks into this area, but there wasn't any response. So fortunately, I've been able to connect him with the correct people, and we're hoping that we can have a winter rink in close proximity to the new school. But that's only going to help the people who live in that close proximity. What about the people? We've got burgeoning neighborhoods that are growing so fast, and you know, I know that my colleagues who have those wards see these kind of changes happening. We can't build winter rinks fast enough. So let's figure out how we can partner together, how we can work together on having a few of these stormwater management pond / facilities to be used for our community. And that's what I'm asking. I'm not asking for us to decide right now which ones. I'm not asking for us to say yes, absolutely. But I think that there is opportunity where we have good, cold winter conditions, that some of these ponds, with the partnerships that we have with the commitment that parents and community groups have shown for our children and for their neighbors, that we can have this. I ask that council support this motion tonight, and then we can have further discussion once we have some more additional information. Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to start off, I strongly support our neighborhood strategy and would encourage and promote at every avenue whenever there is strong community spirit. And I appreciate that the endeavor of what the delegations brought forward and what Councillor Fernandez is trying to achieve is that very community spirit. But where I struggle with supporting this direction is the very word in the motion that Councillor Fernandez has used, safe. She's referring to safe community, but when considering aspect of safety, from everything we've heard from our staff, quite clearly they've outlined that this activity would not be safe for our citizens to do. And they've given technical information, and they outlined concern of that if we were to promote this, there would also have to be at least some standard of care to allow skating on these stormwater facilities. If we are going to dedicate very significant resources that would be required, because we're not discussing today just one pond. If the option before us was just in discussion with a pond that the delegations came forward, my opinion on this might be quite different. But we're looking at citywide, and there would be tens, if not more, of ponds that could be allowed to facilitate this. And the resources required to provide that standard of care, well, we have to pause and think how many outdoor rinks could we allow and facilitate across the city. So, and that's where the question of resource allocation, limiting liability to the corporation, and ensuring that we're more equitable with how we're spending money for community benefit. That's where I sit on this, and that's why I can't support this. I think we do need to continue on entertaining the discussion and continue advocating. I will carry this forward on my regard anyways for the area that I represent. There absolutely needs to be more outdoor rinks and needs to be more funding that through the budget process that needs to be allocated. And I'm glad to see that we did a little bit of that. I don't think that's enough, and we need to carry that effort forward. But I can't support this motion.
Councillor Yanetsky.
I'm prepared to second the motion on behalf of Councillor Fernandez, and I do agree with her comments in terms of working with the neighborhoods and all the input that the residents want to provide and have been outlined here by some of the delegations, and I think it's a step forward. And all we're really basically doing here, all Councillor Fernandez is requesting, is that we just review it, look at the implications, look at the opportunities on that. It was pointed out by the delegation that the city of Saskatoon already has 9 stormwater management ponds that are endorsed by the city, and it probably has criteria and rules and regulations and risks and things that are spelled out, but they've approved it. So that it must be going forward in at least in one city, and there's probably other cities that we haven't investigated that probably have those in place as well. So I think we should explore it and see where it leads to. So I think it's an exploration to see that it's an opportunity to work with the neighborhoods, work with the residents, and provide something there. And of course, each pond would have to be looked on its own merit and its criteria to see whether it's feasible or not. But let's examine and check it out.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank Councillor Fernandez for bringing this here. It affected her more directly than some of us, that it was something in the ward she represents. She's not asking us to make really a major decision tonight. What she's asking is, let's look at this. Is there a way, thinking outside of the box, of possibly making this work. She's not looking for 154 new ponds for the community. I was really impressed tonight by the level of the delegates that came to speak on this issue. And they were, going back to this whole love my neighborhood, I thought we had some tremendous representation here tonight. They answered a lot of questions. We threw a lot of unfair questions at some members, asking them if they want to take the liability on for the whole city and stuff like that. And in spite of that, I thought they answered themselves very well. When this issue first arose, I asked staff a number of questions, and what the questions were, you know, how much does it really cost us to get equipment out of? And it was on one occasion, I'm not sure what that was. I asked about what happened when a couple of people went through the ice, and what was involved as far as we were concerned. Well, tonight was the first night that I understand that they suffered the illness you get when you're in cold water. Really, and the first thing staff said, though, when all this was up, two things. They said it is a risk. There's a risk here, and besides, it's illegal. I thought, you know what, we do talk out of both sides of our mouth, because we allow people to put leaves on our roads in the fall, and that turns out that it can be very risky, and that's illegal. It's against the provincial rules for our roads. Yet we allow ourselves to do that in that case. So I think this has merit. I have to go back to a number of years ago when I used to go on rinks, and I often fell through the ice. Unfortunately, I'm still here. But, you know, and there's no question that there's risk. I was really, nobody here tried to hide the fact of the risk. And I've often said, when you start talking safety, liability, risk, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. But that's not the case. I don't know what will come out of a review, and I'm hoping it's not a review that will cost us a lot of money to look into, but it would be interesting to take a second look at the issue. I think we owe that to the people in the community that are asking the question. We owe it to them not to change everything, not to give in to what their demands are, but let's have an independent review of where we're at, and is there any possibility to do anything different. I mean, you have to live in this community and remember the heyday of skating in Victoria Park. It was a tremendous community neighborhood thing. It was for a much broader neighborhood, but there are so many, I think, many instances such as this small neighborhood that really does bring out the entire neighborhood and the community there. Something that you could never plan to do it the way it does. So I think we owe it to them to let's look at the situation. That's all. Just review it. That's the key word. Review it, and then go forward. Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Bravanovic. What we've heard tonight are incredible examples of some great neighborhood building and building community and connecting neighbors, and it all happens over skating, and I think that's fantastic. The bottom line for me is I want this community, this connecting to continue, but I want it to be done knowing that it is safe for those that are using it. I do want to clear up some misinformation that I did not ask the delegate to take on the entire liability for the whole city. It was personal liability. And that was just to get a gauge of their concern for the safety. Councilor Fernandez is asking for more information and a review. I would like to add something to that, an amendment to that staff would also bring forward costing for increased winter rink facilities and locations and the maintenance cost associated with that increase in order that we can compare. I think we all want this kind of activity, neighborhood building, to continue. So if this is part of it, I would like to add that to it.
Okay, there don't appear to be any other comments. Just one question of staff before I make my own comments. Mr. Reedman, what would the costs be and the implications on the rest of the business plan if this were added to the work in the coming year?
Through the mayor, high-level cost estimates based on the City of Markham's experience with ice testing, which we figure would have to be a part of the component of identifying whether this is something we could bring forward. We're estimating in the order of about $200,000 to $250,000 total costs, and that includes identifying potential sites through a selection process, as well as studying the water levels in those sites, as well as the ice conditions. In terms of the business plan component, there's not a clear lead. What I can say is that staff in a very small team that would do this work are already at capacity, so we would need to make substantial adjustments to the work plan to be able to accommodate this, whether that's reduction in core service delivery in some areas, or business plan items like in engineering there's the low impact development design guidelines. In fire, it's the implementation of emergency management and business continuity programs. In ops, environmental services, there's a number, year-round maintenance of trails and pathways around schools, trail maintenance, service level review, service review of maintenance standards for public spaces are all examples of projects that would have to be cut back on in order to deliver on this unaccounted for work.
Okay, thank you. I see there's a couple others that have asked to speak, so I'll let them go ahead of myself. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. When this was first proposed, I was really quite in favor of wanting to move forward with this and see this go through. But you know, the delegation raised a lot of good questions in regards to his perception of risk and everything else. And after getting advice from our solicitor and running through many scenarios through our solicitor, I don't think I, in good conscience, could support what's being proposed. And it's unfortunate that the public here that came here cannot understand the advice that we received, and it's difficult for them to grasp what we're thinking on that, based on that advice. But I guess one of the fundamental concerns I do have as well is one of the delegates that I represent was questioning how can we afford to maintain our stormwater ponds, and in particular 108. Well, if we had this fee in here with this type of service level, this is a huge service level increase. And I have concerns with that because I don't know if that's a priority that I see at this moment. I think we could look at this in a more fashion towards adding more facilities that are maintained properly. But, you know, there's other services that I would have loved to have seen in our budget, such as tree pruning and everything else that I get constant calls on, even sidewalk clearing. And where are we going to find the funds for those? So that's the fundamental thing that I'm concerned about, is where are we going to find the funding, but also the legality of this, that the public isn't made aware of, to the exact risks that we're dealing with here. And based on all that, I can't support that. Even though I would love to support this, I skated on 108 Pond. That's where I learned to skate. And unfortunately, I can't support this based on the information that I have.
Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I was inclined to support this motion, but I'm shocked at staff's answer at how much money it would cost and that it would affect core services. I don't think that would be responsible for us to direct staff to reduce our course service levels. So I would like to see, though, staff has already done some work to respond to the idea of recreational activities, but that hasn't been necessarily put in the form of a public report, and I think that we owe it to the public to be able to just outline very clearly all the reasons why staff takes whatever position they take, and to make it a matter of public record. So I'm not in favor of spending $250,000 on a feasibility report. But so I would just, I don't know if this is going to require an amendment, but just that I would want to include that this is a tertiary or a very that this is not an in-depth review, but a very straightforward review.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat some of my fellow councillors' comments, but I just wanted to state that just unfortunately there is a lot of information beneath the surface that, like some of the Cox information that we received, that really highlights the risk that's involved. And I really hoped to be able to support something like this, because I too grew up, I didn't swim on ponds, but I grew up in outdoor rinks in my youth, and I know the benefits that they have. But the reality is we need to set policy. We had some extremely responsible parents come forward, and extremely responsible. But we need to set policy in situations where sometimes parents aren't as responsible. Sometimes kids show up at a rink and their parents are nowhere to be found. And if we give the indication that these rinks are in any way safe and something happens, well, we all bear the responsibility of that. On that note, I did want to say, and the only other thing I wanted to comment to in terms of the Saskatoon reference, there's two things. Number one, this has sort of been semi-reviewed by staff already. We've been getting emails on this back for like at least a month. Staff's looked at this very closely, and we have a very good idea of what we're dealing with in terms of cost. And in terms of the Saskatoon reference, I think, again, we do have one example, but we also have to remember that Saskatoon has an incredibly different climate than Kitchener-Waterloo. And even if the climate was different, these ponds are specifically not made in order to support sustainable ice. That's the real risk that's here. The last thing, Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'm inclined to support Councillor Schneider's amendment, but I'm cognizant of the fact that if the amendment gets approved, it could ultimately fail as a result of the main motion. So I would ask Councillor Schneider if you would consider maybe just making that a secondary motion as opposed to an amendment to the main motion. So I could support that, but not necessarily support the main motion.
Okay, I'll come back to you then, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Singh and Gazzola, you've already spoken. Okay.
We just want to amend the also so that it's secondary and specific to on its own. There's a link to the first motion.
So we'll come back to that. Councillor Gazzola.
I have a point of clarification.
Okay, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I thought the question was asked as to what would be involved in doing a review, and to my thinking that was a matter of staff taking some time, and we're told that there are so many other things on the horizon that staff wouldn't be able to do it. So then I would imagine that if we want to do it, we would hire staff. This figure of $250,000 that's been thrown out, or $215,000, is that to do a review, or is that sort of costs that you've heard when there is a limited program in place? Those are two different things.
Mr. Reedman?
Through the mayor, so that is the cost to do the review, and what that's based on is the city of Markham, we're looking at one pond, and it was $155,000 for 1 year of testing on one location. So for us to be able to make a recommendation on changing the bylaw, we would have to have an understanding of how the ice functions on at least one stormwater facility in the city of Kitchener. The additional cost beyond the $155,000 is studying the water levels in some ponds, as well as a process to identify potential locations. We have 38 outdoor rinks that are managed by volunteers and one at Victoria Park that's run by the city. So we want to look for locations that are in a position or in a location that is not near other pond facilities, so that there would be a screening process around sort of the technical sides as well as the social sides, so proximity to other rinks in terms of that.
Is that it for question, Councillor Gazzola?
That answers my question, not anywhere near to my satisfaction.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you might not like the answer.
Yeah. I might question the answer too, but I guess this isn't the place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Etherington, you haven't spoken yet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out, and it's come up a couple of times, if we go down this road, for sure you're going to get requests, hundreds of requests, to go back to the days when there was skating on Victoria Park Lake. There were all kinds of legitimate and legal reasons of liability, everything we've heard tonight, in and outside of camera, for why we stopped skating on Victoria Park. One had to do with liability, the other had to do with huge costs, because no sooner would you get the lake capable of tolerating skating than the ice would melt, and we'd be right back to starting from scratch again. And that was a huge cost. And the winters are gradually becoming warmer. I think that's a fact. And we're getting less and less time, as I noted at the weekend, when there can be quality skating. The rinks we created on the common, I hate to imagine the cost that go into maintaining those rinks, which quite regularly in the winter months melt, as they did last weekend. So I guess it's just a word of warning that if we go down this road, I think the next step would be residents in here asking for us to go back to the days of that Councillor Gazzola mentioned, when we'd be skating on Victoria Lake again. And that would be a huge cost.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I would love nothing more than to be able to support this. But if we have no intent of going down this road, then don't give anybody false expectations. We heard a lot of information when we were in camera, and like others have said, we're not able to share that legal advice with you. And people are going to say that we hid behind the risk, but there's inherent risk. And I appreciate what the residents have done and what they continue to do. I know for me, my dad always had a backyard rink, so I would always get to skate in my backyard, and I was lucky to have that. I don't know if there's other opportunities that we have to look at different solutions to try and solve this problem for you in your specific neighborhood. Maybe Councillor Schneider's motion can look at some sort of alternate solution, but there is serious reasons that I can't support this, and I would love to. I would love to be able to, but I can't. And so with that, I can't support moving forward, because even if the review is done, the risks and what we were shared isn't going to change. And so I don't want to give you that expectation over the next number of months that I'm going to be able to support it in the future. So for that reasons, I can't support it.
Okay, it appears that that's all the council comments, so I'll make my own comments. This clearly is a difficult issue, because what we're trying to do as a council is balance some really great community-focused, dedicated and passionate neighbors and parents with the responsibilities and the fiduciary responsibilities we have as council to look after the overall best interests of the community as a whole. When it comes to neighborhoods, I think most would agree you'd be hard-pressed to find someone I'm one of a few who speaks as strongly and passionately about neighborhoods and is committed to seeing us as a city make the necessary investments, see us as a city remove red tape where it's possible, and see us as a city do good things to make neighborhoods better, stronger, and work with the kinds of great neighbors we heard from today to work together and make things happen. We want to see neighbors come together to do great things. But after I look at that, I have to balance that with the responsibilities I have as an elected official responsible for the well-being of the overall community. And part of that means looking at risk and looking at the responsibilities that we have in that regard. In the particular instances that we heard about tonight, we've been fortunate. There has been, there hasn't been any incidents, fortunately. We have a very dedicated group of neighbors and parents, but we can't ascertain that that is going to be the case throughout the entire city or in the areas of even a few select ponds. I think we also need to recognize that, different cities have different realities from a weather point of view. We heard about Saskatoon as an example. Well, the reality is when you look in January and February, it's very rare for the temperature to go above -10 in Saskatoon. That's not the reality in Kitchener. Just like it's not the reality in Vancouver. I can assure you there's not many stormwater management ponds in Vancouver that people skate on, or even rinks and parks that people skate on, because the weather doesn't allow for it. And this is something that's changed. I see a delegation in the audience tonight who didn't speak, who remembers the great days of Victoria Park, and when the pond did freeze reliably for many, many years. That doesn't happen anymore. And we heard how, we had a vehicle go through the ice. For me, ultimately what happens, and one of the things that we need to factor in is risk to human life. And as a member of council, especially after I've heard that we've had 2 young people fall through the ice and deal, with shock and hypothermia, we know that this can happen. And I personally am not prepared to be in a situation where I or a member of our police service or our fire department needs to visit some parent's home to say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith or whatever the name is, I'm sorry, I have to share some bad news with you. And that's what we have to deal with in dealing with this particular issue. So, I understand, why Councillor Fernandez would want to bring this motion forward. But the reality is, as we've heard, the risks are too high for a municipality like us to go down this path for a facility that, quite frankly, isn't designed for this purpose. It's designed to perform certain stormwater and engineering roles in the community, not for being a skating facility. As a council, we've invested additional dollars, not a lot, last week in the budget, another $15,000 into our backyard, not in our backyard, but rather our park skating program. And I'm glad to hear that Councillor Schneider is looking to bring a motion forward about how we would do even more than that in the future. Quite frankly, I think any dollars would be better spent offering free skating in some of our rinks, doing additional park rinks and so on, as opposed to, based on the kind of research that Mr. Reedman has done, checking ice in 1 or 2 ponds and expending significant dollars and still potentially having some risk associated with it. So I can't support Councillor Fernandez's amendment, but will subsequently support Councillor Schneider's motion.
Recorded vote, please.
Okay. A recorded vote has been called, so we'll deal with the amendment first. Yes, Councillor Yanetsky seconded the amendment. I'm dealing with Councillor Fernandez's amendment first. We will deal with Councillor Schneider's motion because it's a separate motion. It's not an amendment afterwards. So everyone clear? We're voting on Councillor Fernandez's amendment right now. Afterwards, we'll be dealing with Councillor Schneider's motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? The amendment doesn't carry. We'll now deal with Councillor Schneider's secondary motion. I need a seconder for that. Councillor Ioannidis. All recorded vote on this. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. And now the business plan, the rest of the business plan, recorded vote. Mr. Chapman, you have something to say on that? Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to make sure that the motion has been adjusted to reflect the clarification around the business plan being approved, subject to...
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me of that. There was some question last week around the business plan, and does it require notice of motion to make changes and so on. And so the motion that we're dealing with is that the business plan, as outlined, be approved as with amendments permissible from time to time. And I think that speaks to the concerns that Council raised last week when we discussed this. And that's carried unanimously. So to the delegation, thank you very much for coming in this evening. I know it's not the resolution that you were hoping for, but it is something that Council gave significant consideration to. We'll now move on to an item under Committee of the Whole, and it's the fence variance, I believe, that you're here for, and you're just here to answer any questions if there are any. Okay, does somebody want to move the fence variance? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Singh. Any discussion? The fence variance. Yes. Go ahead, Councillor Gazzola.
The question here is moving from a 0.5 to 4.5, or? No, from 4.5 to 0.5.
Who from staff wants to answer this?
I'm just trying to understand, is that a minor variance or a major variance?
Well, obviously it's before us. It's been deemed to be a minor variance, and the recommendation is in front of us. It wouldn't be here if it was a major variance.
I guess I'm trying to understand what is minor and what is major. That's quite a difference.
Okay, who from staff can answer that? Ms. McDonald?
Just a reminder that, in fact, this is relating to a fence, so the same principles or minor variants that apply in a planning application don't exist. So they would have looked at this purely probably on fact and comment from staff, but I wasn't directly involved, so that's the best I can offer as assistance.
Yeah, okay, I don't want to interfere, and I don't know I just look at the mathematics of it. Like there's another one here tonight that's going from 24 square meters down to 10 square meters, and to me that's
okay. We're only dealing with Simeon.
No, I'm trying to understand. This is quite, to me, it goes from 4.5 meters to 0.5. Now that seems like mathematically, it seems like quite a difference, but. I don't want to hold this up. No one can seem to explain it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know there's no people here objecting to it, so either.
All right, that's fine.
Any other questions? Ms. McDonald, do you want to add something further?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The other provisions relating to the other sign variances, those would be true minor variants of tests under the Planning Act. Because they relate to the signs versus the fence. So there's a different scenario and different principles would apply.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So all those in favor of the fence variance on Simeon? All those opposed? That's carried. It's been approved. Thank you. We'll now move on to item CSD 17-104 pertaining to the concert at Bingaman's, and Rob Mataccioni's here. Welcome, Rob. And thanks for your patience.
I'm new to this, so forgive me. Good evening, guys. I'd like to begin quickly. I don't think I'll come close to taking the 5 minutes allocated. I wanted everybody to know that on January 10th, we officially launched with the lineup. So I wanted to bring you up to date in terms of the results. They were staggering, incredibly successful. We had well in excess of 80,000 original views to the site. Something you might find very interesting is that there were only 2,000 of those 85,000 plus that were regional. So we're experiencing a 70% out of region traffic flow, and the sales are reflecting that. So as I've said in the past, the world is watching, and it literally, truly is. So we're doing great things here, and I applaud Kitchener in being recognized as an entertainment center, in particular in our event. But to the issue at hand, and just as an aside, we did slot in a 9:30 time because we did identify Friday, Saturday, and Sunday artists in the lineup. I want you all aware of that as well. Please take that into consideration. But I wanted to, again, just reaffirm some of the facts that we discussed last time out, and some of the information that Ms. McNeil, I believe, brought forward and provided in the way of an email and an attachment, reflected even more so the weather anomaly in particular. As we saw, there were no complaints at all on the Saturday, and very, very, very few on the Friday. They were limited almost entirely to the Sunday. So I think the steps that we've taken will mitigate that, in that anything that occurs post 9:30 can't occur. We don't plan to be open beyond 9:30. As a further note, I'd like to let all of you know that in the last little while, as I've been listening, you've all exceeded the noise level that's been suggested by the city on average. If this point of discussion, if this level of discussion is offensive, then this is what we're dealing with. It was well over 55 dBs, but in some cases over 60, but primarily it was between 55 and 60 decibels. And that's why I believe that the 60 decibel level is an appropriate level. Moreover, if we were to remove ourselves from this room and go on the other side of that door, the effective levels would drop in half. bringing us to around the 30 decibel level, keeping in mind that what we are requesting is a decibel level at the front door or at the plane of a window or a door on the outside, not on the inside. So, I think that's significant. As promoters, we do accept a certain level of risk. Uncontrollable risk. Year one was a testament to that. Weather was devastating, and as a result, we felt that financially and otherwise. This type of risk is not risk that sits well with us, because this is totally controllable. We believe that we don't ask for financial support. We try to be a benefit and an asset to the community in what we bring, and this is one small step in what we believe ensures our success. Year over year, we have taken steps to address the concerns of the community and yourselves. I think this particular strategy is a leap, not a step, and I implore you to take steps, not leaps. I hope that that we continue in our pathway of success and a good relationship back and forth. And I look forward to the success of this year and year 5 and other strategies and events and a whole array of objectives that we have as an organization to work with, for, and especially in conjunction with the city and its objectives with respects to it being a substantial player in the entertainment space, and in all other endeavors that we may see fit in the city and in the region. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions? There don't appear to be any questions.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions of staff? Okay. Just maybe one question I would have of staff. You've obviously looked at some of the recommendations, well, two questions I would have. You've obviously looked at some of the recommendations or the request of Mr. Mattaccioni from last time, and you shared some information in the report. Can you maybe just articulate it, because I know there are people who are potentially watching this evening, so that it becomes part of the record?
Through the mayor, we did connect with Novus Environmental, who was the engineering company who did the study for us and looked at the Ever After Music Festival over the last couple of years, and provided us with some recommendations, as well as discovering that there was a severe weather inversion that occurred last year, which resulted in a high number of complaints. We also circulated the information to Novus Environmental on the PK Sound Trinity system that Mr. Mattaccioni had provided a package about when he was here at committee. And I have also spoken with the City of Ottawa, who also has a similar EDM festival, the Escapade Music Festival, where this system was first used last year. And based off of the feedback that I've received from both Ottawa as well as Novus and all of the research I've done on it, it appears to be a step in the right direction, and appears to be able to avoid the noise spillage out into the nearby communities that may be impacted by that. So it definitely does sound like a positive step. The only other comments that were made were that Novus still believed that after their study, their recommendation is still that that council support the staff recommendation of 55 dBA as the maximum heard in a residential area. I think the premise behind that is that 55 will ultimately sound like half of what people were hearing last year. And although I understand that the volume here, 60 or 65 decibels, is the sound of a normal conversation, I think we have to take into account that that's what we're asking residents to listen to and tolerate, that volume in their backyard all weekend long. So it is a normal sounding conversation that people would have. But again, to somebody who's listening to that over a 3-day period, that may be excessive. So the recommendation from Novus is that 55 would be their recommendation. They don't believe that a 5 decibel drop would be significant enough. It would just make a noticeable range to the human ear, whereas the 10 would sound like half. So again, in speaking with Ottawa, when we compared the proximity of the residential properties, they are closer. They're about 400 meters, as Mr. Macchioni had suggested. And the closest residential neighborhood that we found here was the Notches Rothsay area, which was about 750 meters. However, Ottawa did state that they believe that the neighbors in that surrounding area would be conditioned to a higher background level. If you recall, Novus had said that the background level in this area would be between 40 and 45 during the quiet times. Ottawa felt that theirs would be substantially higher because there are major arterial roads in that area as well as a major 400 series highway. And there's a stadium at Lansdowne Park where there's regular events occurring. Therefore, those residents would normally be hearing a higher increase of volume, and their background level would never be as low as ours. So overall, the recommendation that staff's making, and that was heard by Novus, was that the 55 would be our preference and would be, I think, have the most significant impact on the residents and what they're hearing.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, do we know what Cambridge and Waterloo sort of use as a standard with their events and festivals?
Through the Mayor, I don't believe Cambridge has a formal exemption process that I'm aware of. Waterloo does, and they set theirs at 55 dBA as well.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Councillor Gazzola, you're in line to make comments? Or do you have questions? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Gazzola.
I just want to clarify, so what is the recommendation before us? Is it 55 and a 9 o'clock close, or is it 60 and a 9:30 close?
It's the original recommendation from committee.
Okay. I would have liked to have asked the delegate before if that, realizing that, as if they're okay with that, if that's satisfactory.
Mr. Matticcioni, if you want to come back and clarify that.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that you're hearing we're not budging from where we were a week ago, and how does that suit you? Or?
It's problematic. It's problematic, and I will not compromise the quality of the event. That said, you know, it's before you. We believe that we've taken the appropriate steps at 60 and 9:30. And not only the appropriate steps to try to satisfy the community, appropriate steps that really multiply our risk as promoters. And moreover, there's been such significant talk about the complaints, and I respect them all. In the last meeting, we discussed how the public could come and let us know. I'm a little disappointed as to the participation with respects to some of the potential complainants not being here and voicing their opinion and speaking directly to what I bring forward. We're here. We've been here for 3 years. We're here again this year, and my intent is to be here long term. And I love the community. I love this city. I'm not from it, but I'm appreciating it more and more every time. But this isn't, in my estimation, it's not right. We're taking steps. Every year we take bigger and bolder steps. And I think that what we're proposing is a significant step in the right direction.
Thank you. You've answered my question. You don't like it, but you're going to live with it.
I'm going to live with it in you know, terms of what occurs as a result that weekend. I can't speak to that.
Okay, thank you. Now I have a question to staff.
Okay, go ahead.
No,
you can take a seat, Mr. Matticcioni.
Sorry, thank you. No, there were some, when I was reading the report there, they talked about the concept of having a public meeting with the neighborhood or interested parties. Is that going to go on, or is that forgotten now?
Through the mayor, I had suggested that, we knew that Mr. Macchioni, when he was here at committee, had proposed a higher decibel level. So I had put some options in the email to council stating that if council were to support the 60 dB as was requested, that we look at putting some conditions, and that meeting with the residents and answering any questions or concerns be one of those.
Okay, so if someone were to make that recommendation, you would like to see your other comments carried out, is that right?
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Yeah, what about the 9 and the 9:30 closing? Did you deal with that at all, or you're not prepared to move at all on that?
Through the mayor, our recommendation is 9 p.m. That's what we heard from residents when we spoke with them after the event last year.
Okay, my only final question is, what you're doing now, you're using last year as the standard, is that right? That's sort of being established as the standard.
Through the mayor, somewhat, yes, because last year we did have a major weather inversion, so we've used that as the reasonable worst case scenario.
Okay, that's what I mean, but our standard is being based now on the worst case scenario.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fernandez, do you have questions, or you're in line to make comments?
Question?
Okay, go ahead.
My understanding from the report is that the reduction to 55 was at the stage, like where the majority of the audience would probably hear the music, but that further away it would be significantly less, especially the reduction from 65 to 55. Did I understand that correctly?
Through the mayor, we wouldn't be asking for 55 at what they would refer to as the front of house. That's where the audience is listening. So no, we wouldn't be asking for 55 there. We're asking at whatever the decibel level, and I believe they said it was 110 at front of house. Yes, 110 decibels at front of house would equate to, it couldn't be any louder than 55 decibels in a residential zone.
Oh, okay. Sorry, then I misunderstood how I was reading that. So 110 front of house would result in 55 in somebody's backyard.
Correct.
Okay. Has there any, with that reduction, has there been any consideration to changing the end time to 9:30?
Through the mayor, we're going on, I've based my recommendations off of what I've heard from the residents as a result of last year. And I would stick to that it would be up to council to decide if they think that 9:30, as Mr. Macchioni has suggested, is reasonable.
Because if I look at the 2016 numbers, the decibels, the average decibel reading was 53, and there was only total of 7 complaints over the whole 3 days. But that festival went on till 11 p.m. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, that is correct. And just to make note, that 7 didn't include the complaints from the Breslau residents that year, because at that point we were not clear on whether we could actually enforce in Breslau. So there were 9 complaints that came in from Breslau.
Okay, so plus 9, so that's 18 total. Still significantly less than from last year. Okay, so I'm wondering if can I make an amendment to the motion? Okay.
Well, when the time comes.
When the time comes. Okay.
Sure. Councillor Marsh, do you have questions or comments? Okay, go ahead.
So just building on what Councillor Gazzola was asking, I'm trying to understand if 55 decibels is based on the worst case scenario, and if we can anticipate that we're likely not to have that, then 55 decibels should be Can staff comment on whether or not 55 decibels is a reasonable amount if the new sound system and if the weather conditions are favorable? Then when they play at 110 at the front of house, we will not. Can you tell me? Do you anticipate that we won't reach 55 decibels at the residential level?
Through the mayor, I guess if everything works out, then we'll probably be fine. If the weather conditions cooperate and the new sound system, I mean, it sounds fantastic. If that all works out, my only concern again is if we were to experience another temperature inversion.
Temperature inversion. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Etherington, are you a question or a comment? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Etherington.
Gloria, could you remind me of the stats relating to, I believe there were about 100 complaints, but what were the stats in relation to the police and emergency service calls last year?
Councillor Etherington, I don't want to be difficult, but we're dealing with a noise exemption. That's the basis of our responsibility here. So we need to keep any questions focused around that.
Gloria, what was the number of complaints relating to noise?
To noise? We had 99 on the Sunday and 3 on the Friday. So a total of 102 over the weekend.
102, and were those complaints to you, to bylaw, or to police, or both?
Well, all of our noise complaints have to go through the police, so they would initially have come in through the police.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, Councillor Galloway-Seelock, if you want to bring forward the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm just bringing forward the original recommendation that was brought to us from Community Infrastructure Services. And so that is unchanged at this point. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Marsh.
Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, I have an amendment. Sorry. That given that there will be a reduction of 10 dBA from 65 to 55, that the ending of the concert be at 9:30 p.m. This is 1.5 hours shorter than the previous year's concert. Forgot that last word. And the reason that I'm proposing this is I believe that the promoter has done a lot of work. I believe that they've tried to be responsive to the noise complaints. And when I look at 2016 and a total of 18 complaints, that the average dBA was 53, but the concert went till 11 p.m. By moving it to 9:30, I think we are responding to the concerns that we've heard, but we're also giving the promoter the ability to have his sort of grand finale. I'm suggesting this with a cautionary note in that should we end up with this inversion and we end up, with 102 or more complaints that we are going to have to really seriously look at a 9 o'clock ending because it is a school work night. I think 9:30 is not ridiculously late for most residents, and I think it does allow the promoter to finish his concert with the impact that he would like to do.
Okay, is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Gazzola?
Recorded vote as well.
Sure. Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, if I can comment?
Yep.
Yeah, no, I could support, and now it doesn't affect the ward that I represent, or to a very small extreme, so but it seems reasonable to me. What I would also really like to have seen would be a public meeting with anyone that's interested. The promoter has suggested that they would be willing to do that. I sort of took that too, that they would probably be willing to support most of the cost to do that. It would be a great opportunity for people to have an opportunity to have their say. I think I was always concerned with when you set the standard as the worst case scenario. To me, that is really somewhat of an extreme. This here is a compromise, and actually, the only thing that Councillor Fernandez is changing here is the time, where she's not changing the other factor. So it is a bit of a compromise. So I will support it.
Councillor Marsh.
Well, as a representative of one of the neighborhoods that is affected by this festival every year, I love the idea of this festival. I support it, and I plan to attend at some point during that weekend. But I definitely think that we have given the benefit of the doubt for 3 years and allowed an 11 o'clock end time on the Sunday because the arguments are very convincing. However, I think that it's in our 4th year now. It's the time to have the promoter give it a chance to end at 9 o'clock on a Sunday and be respectful of the neighborhoods surrounding the area, and to have the big finale end at 9 o'clock. I don't see, since this is a long-term relationship, why don't we just see how that goes, and maybe the promoter will be pleasantly surprised. So we can only find out if we try it.
Any other comments? Councillor Yurnatsky.
I see that the applicant has made a good effort to try to address the issue of the noise, timing, etc. And I know staff have tried to do their due diligence in terms of finding a reasonable decibel level and conclusion on a Sunday evening in terms of timing. I look at the stats from last year and I think about the nature of those complaints. I can't support either the amendment of Councillor Fernandez nor the recommendation from staff, because I see that we're still going in that same direction, that the residents are still going to be affected and are not going to be happy. I just feel that way, and even though you have a 110 decibel level at the stage, and that's not even enough for those people. They want it up at 130, 140. I mean, the applicant is trying to keep it down to a degree, but the noise, as opposed to the music, the noise is going to resonate right through the eastern part of Kitchener. And I don't see that as being satisfactory to the residents who live there. And even on a Sunday night when the kids want to go to school, people got to go to work, 9 o'clock or 9:30 is not even acceptable. At the committee meeting, I suggested maybe we even look at 6 o'clock. But there's a sound and light show that basically continues on in the evening, so I can understand that concern. But light show doesn't bother me because nobody will see it other than those people that are at the event. But the noise, people will hear it. Can't support either recommendation.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm going to support staff's recommendation. I'm not terribly happy about it because I do think we've pushed the promoters in this instance possibly further than we should be. One question I've been asked often is, I think there's some confusion in the public about the City of Kitchener's involvement in this event, and this isn't a City of Kitchener event. This is put on by, it's entirely private. And so one of the questions I get asked about this is, why do we support this when it affects us, people paying the taxes, and a few people are becoming wealthy off of it? And I find that interesting because that's really not the case at all, because really the economic spin-off from events like this are several times what any individual is making on an event like this. The events like this fill the hotels and the restaurants, and they use the taxi drivers that the people in our community, our neighbors, their employment. It literally supports their employment. That's why we as a city need to make sure that we support events like this. So while I think we are going on a harder path this year, I want to be 100% clear that it's my sincere hope that what happened last year was entirely an anomaly, and I look forward to seeing a return this year to a lower number of complaints, and I hope that in the future we can be more accommodating to this group. But we do have to make sure that when doors and windows are shut, that people that are trying to sleep aren't bothered by the music. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I don't think this is the final step. I think that we can hopefully be more accommodating based on the sound equipment that we have this year.
Councillor Arnaitis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. First of all, I want to thank staff for doing a phenomenal job. I think you're doing what you've heard from the community and what you've heard around this horseshoe, I think it's just outstanding what you've done. So I don't want, my opinion on this event is nothing personal. But I'm from the view of when you want to look at promoting a city, and as Councillor Davey had mentioned, some of the benefits to the community, and to the community is numerous. And again, you can't stress the amount of exposure that this community gets with an event such as this. And I would have been probably quick to go along with adding some of these restrictions if I had a feeling from the promoters that they weren't accommodating. But because they were accommodating and they were willing to work with the city on every aspect, I'm going to support the recommendation. I hope in the future for next year that you do have some public engagement with the community, and that way that you can get a better grasp of what. Just because the residents didn't come here tonight doesn't mean I don't think they don't have that they don't care. I think they do care, but I think this amendment is just a slight compromise, and I'm willing to support it. So with that, I hopefully it will get the support.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm like Councillor the councillor who spoke earlier. Yeah, I'm against both of these, the amendment and the actual motion on the noise issue. I don't think, for me, I would always put the peace and pleasure of a summer weekend for residents ahead of concert goers and promoters. We've got an example here of quite honestly a huge number of complaints, noise complaints, and issues that I was prevented from talking about involving our emergency services and police. So I'll be voting against both reluctantly, because I do think the promoters, this is the most I've ever seen promoters do to try to circumvent those problems. But I don't think they'll succeed, and we'll be back here later in the summer with a similar number of complaints.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I believe I made these comments in the committee meeting as well, but this event can go on without us. The only reason it's here is for a noise exemption, so it can proceed without us. And the only recourse that we would have at the end of the day is to fine them because they're against the noise bylaw. So we have an opportunity to work with them or work against them. And so I think what we've done here is really worked with them. And they've been good partners with us. They've worked with us every year to try and mitigate what's happened. They had an unfortunate situation. They had nice weather. even though in other years they didn't have nice weather, but nice weather that caused a problem. So I bring it back to the fact that it's on private property, it's a private event, and they can proceed with or without us. Just what regulations do we want to try and work with them so that we don't have to go the route of charging them or fining them for being against the noise bylaw? I think staff have done a tremendous job in getting to this point. As I said, they've worked with us every year to take steps in the right direction. And so I continue to have confidence that they will work with us. I understand we're not going to probably go as far as you want this year, but I agree with the amendment to go to 9:30 this year and see how it goes. And then we can always come back next year. But really, I want to get to a place with the promoter where this isn't a discussion that we have to have every year, year after year after year. And so I hope we experienced the worst case scenario last year and that we don't have a problem at 55 decibels this year and that 9:30 is an accommodating time for everybody. I'm optimistic that this is going to work because we have to find a solution or we have to move on. And I think you have new technology coming into play this year and I'm optimistic it's going to work. But then again, this is coming from a councillor who's on the complete opposite side of the city and hears absolutely, actually I heard it the first year, but that's also because the stage was facing a completely different direction. And so I will support the main motion and the amendment and hopefully that this new system will work its miracles that it's promised.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very quick. Initially, I was pretty set on supporting the staff recommendation. My focus was on the numerous complaints that we had received from our citizens. And the 100 plus is quite a lot. And I thought what staff had brought forward was probably the best course of action and a good action to place a precedence of how large events anywhere in the city need to be conducted, be on city property or on private land. But one thing I've been pleasantly surprised by has been the promoters' conduct with council, their willingness to come, place their perspective before us, and still propose options and willingness to some aspects of compromise as well. That is a good working relationship that we need to acknowledge and hope others will do the same. For that reason, I'm willing to support Councillor Fernandez's amendment. I think that's a small change that we can make to the staff recommendation where the decibel is still the same, but the end time giving a little extra half hour may give some aspect of us trying to meet in the middle as much as possible with the promoter. And I liked what Councillor Galloway-Sealock has said, that again, this will be endeavored to find the right balance. And perhaps we can look at this in the coming years and continue to tweak so we get the formula right where we can continue on attracting the type of events while ensuring that we are conscious of concerns of our citizens as well. So I will be supporting the amendment.
Any other comments? If not, then I'll be making mine. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Mattaccioni and his team for the work that they have done with our staff. I think it has been a collaborative relationship that we've tried to build in terms of addressing some of the challenges that come with EDM concerts, while at the same time recognizing also the benefit and the importance of them to our community and to the overall quality of life. That we're trying to build in our community, one that recognizes that we need to be open to all musical genres, from country music to EDM to classical to good old-fashioned rock and roll. We have had some challenges over the last couple of years, and last year in particular, for a variety of reasons, some of which, as we've learned, are in Mother Nature's control and not in anybody else's, have created some problems for us. I am also looking at this in the context of the fact that this isn't going to be a one-time event. I mean, both Mr. Mattaccioni and Mr. Bingaman are interested in hosting more of these kinds of events at Bingaman's over the course of the summer. And so I'm looking at this in the context of what are the steps we need to take to build goodwill with the community again so that we can see all of these events be successful and not see a potential negative backlash going forward. And so for this year, I am inclined to support the recommendation as it is, as an attempt to build goodwill with the community again, and not support the amendment. But it's something that I am also willing to, and I'll say it up front now, relook at next year. Let's have a good year. Let's, make some of the investments in this sound equipment and so on, and demonstrate how this can work well. And then I think we can make some further adjustments back once we've built some of that goodwill with the community. And that's goodwill that not only will be built presumably for the EDM concert, but also for some of the other events that are going to take place at Bingaman's likely this summer and in the future. Because I think those are good for the community, and I want to see more of that happen. I think we all do. So I also want to say, as we deal with this, and clearly there's some differences of opinion, and that's healthy, regardless of what happens with the amendment, I think when we then get to the main motion, Council needs to keep in mind that if the amendment doesn't pass, that we should still at least make sure that the main motion passes, or otherwise we run a scenario where there is no regulation and we don't grant a noise exemption at all. And certainly that's not what I'm hearing around the council horseshoe. So I just want to make sure that people think about that as they're going through their voting process, because sometimes it can be a little confusing in these types of circumstances. So with that, a recorded vote has been called, and we'll deal with the amendment first. Those in favor? Those opposed? The motion doesn't carry. We'll now go to the main motion, the original motion. Those in favor? Those opposed? Interesting. That's carried. So you've been granted your noise exemption based on the original recommendation that came forward. We will now go to questions on the tenders. Somebody want to move the tenders, please? Councillor Galloway-Silak, Councillor Singh. Any questions on Charles and Benton parking garage repairs? Councillor Gazzola.
I just want to, I'd like to know who built the garage. Is that information I can be provided with?
Sorry?
I'd like to know who built the garage.
Okay.
I thought 5 years is such a short period. We have to. So
Ms. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry that was before my time, and I'm not aware of the vendor's name, but I'd be happy to look through the files and provide that to you after the fact.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Mr. Reedman? Do you have anything?
Through the mayor, so the main contractor was Malou Blamey, and there was a number of subcontractors for different components of the work.
Thank you.
Councillor Yanetsky, questions on the garage? Go ahead.
Thank you. See, the garage is only like 7 years old, and there's already parts of it falling apart. I mean, we have a problem here, it looks like. I thought some of these buildings and facilities, when they're built, would last many, many years. I mean, we have other garages already built, like, the Duke Street one that's been around for 50 years or more. And I know it needs replacement and parts, et cetera, and maintenance. But here we got a building that's relatively brand new, and it's got problems. Why would it be like that? Is this from salt or what?
Well, Mr. Reedman, maybe you can respond, but maybe you can also clarify if it in fact is falling apart or not, because I think we want to make sure people aren't concerned about the safety of using that garage.
Through the mayor, that is correct. The garage is not falling apart. The approach that the Park Enterprise has been taking is to do engineered inspections every 3 years to minimize salt penetration into the concrete, because the cost exponentially increases when we get chlorides into concrete. So this is preventative maintenance to reduce larger costs that if we weren't to do this maintenance, we would be incurring.
Okay. Any questions on the waterworks repair services? Councillor Gazzola.
Just a simple question. Is this under the new bylaw, purchasing bylaw, would this normally come here?
Ms. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. We had one proposal received on that.
It's here because of that, because there was only one proposal.
Correct.
Okay.
I apologize. I should have added a note about that.
Yeah,
in the
okay,
report.
that's fine.
And on supply and install of snow and ice removal equipment, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'm just here. It's 40% above what we have left in budget. Why wouldn't we, when it's such a big discrepancy, is there an opportunity to look around, or is there anything we can do about it?
Ms. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so this is a bit of a unique situation. This dump body that we purchased has a live bottom conveyor in the bottom of the dump body, and it's the first one the city has ever purchased. So while we had gathered preliminary pricing from industry about a year and a half ago prior to our bidding, this is the first time we have competitively bid this product to have actual pricing on file.
Okay, that's fine. So it is an unusual situation. I wanted to know why our budgeting would be that far off, but if you say it's the first time we really had an opportunity to look at that, that's fine.
Okay, and there being no further questions on any of them, they have been moved and seconded. Any comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll now move on to reports of the committees. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yes, it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Marsh that numbers 1 through 5 be approved from the Community Infrastructure Service Committee, as we've already dealt with number 6.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We've dealt with the item of unfinished business. We'll now move on to new business. Councillor Marsh. That's you.
I was used to the other pace of this meeting, which was a lot slower. It is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Galloway-Seelock. I won't read out all of the whereases, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
So be it resolved that the City of Kitchener urges the Province of Ontario to recognize the contribution of local libraries within their communities and to cease the 20-year budget freeze to local libraries in an acknowledgement to the services they offer to all residents. And be it further resolved that the City of Kitchener urges the Province of Ontario to reinstate adequate and appropriate funding for local libraries, increasing each year going forward in line with the Consumer Price Index. And be it finally resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport, who is our local Minister Vernile, to the Ontario Minister of Municipal Affairs, to the local MPs and MPPs, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Association of Municipalities Ontario, the Ontario Library Association, etc. So I just want to add that in consultation with the CEO of the library, I have secured a little bit more information. That is just that it was in 1996 that the public library operating grant from the province of Ontario to local libraries across Ontario was cut by 50%. And then in 1998, the amount was frozen. So in 1999, that next year, the grant from the province was 4.7% of the Kitchener Public Library's budget, and as of this year, it's only about 2.5%. So the recommended amount that the Ontario Library Association is advocating for, and that the letter I am proposing our council sends to those above mentioned recipients, would be that we increase the current budget from $33 million to $50 million, so an increase of $17 million this year, and then subsequently to again increase with the CPI.
Okay, is there a seconder for your motion? Councillor Galloway-Seelock, thank you. Just one thing. Are you sure you want to include MPs in FCM only because it's a provincial matter? So I'm not sure there's much value. I mean, quite frankly, you'll just get a letter back from FCM saying this isn't part of our responsibility. So, okay, so that's part of your original motion. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I raise this question every year, I think, at our budget meeting, and I was told that we had sent a resolution, and I guess we hadn't, but we are now, and I'm glad to see it. My only question, I had wondered about the timing, whether it was 20 or 22 years or whatnot, and that's, my only question is, why would we not send a copy of this to our Premier? Why not go right to the...
I think I saw it there was just written in invisible ink. Councillor Marsh?
Okay,
I'm
that's
happy
fine.
to strike FCM and the MPs, take them off the list, and add the Premier and all of the current party leaders who are actually MPPs, so they'll get it anyway.
This is the year to do that, right?
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further comments? Recorded vote. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Marsh, for bringing this motion forward. It's long overdue, and we can certainly add it into our advocacy with the province, particularly with Ms. Vernile. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Oh, you've already voted? Okay. Okay, go ahead. We can call it to question. All those in favor? Actually, recorded vote. Okay. It's unanimous. Thank you. There we go. Great, thank you. Nothing from the regional side. Any questions and answers? If not, it's been moved by Councillor Davey. Sorry, Councillor Yanetsky, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. It's not really more of a question, it's more of an answer. Just want to bring to the attention of the members of council here, as well as senior staff, of some great acknowledgements we have in the City of Kitchener. In the latest issue, the January-February issue of this year of the Ontario Professional Planners Institute, OPPI, in 2 articles of Excellence in Planning Awards, and the acknowledgement of a report prepared by Michelle Drake dealing with Kitchener neighborhood strategy, and an article by her, as well as an article by Tina Malone Wright on a Kitchener Parks study that has been taking place here. These two reports basically acknowledge the work that's being done here in Kitchener by staff and council in terms of its support and approvals. And as a result of that, this report basically is circulated to all municipalities and all planners across Ontario to show what is happening in our community. So I wish to congratulate staff for submitting these reports and articles to the OPPI, and maybe senior staff can pass on those acknowledgements to the writers of the reports.
Thank you for that, Councillor Yanetsky. Any other Q&As? Okay, if not, actually just under the unfinished business, probably just as a point of information for council, earlier today, myself and our economic development staff participated in an announcement at Myovision. They were recipients of $1.5 million from the Southwest Ontario Development Fund. That it was received in conjunction with a $13.5 million investment from Myovision as part of their growth, and that is destined to see them grow from their current roughly 180 employees upwards of 300 in the first phase of their next expansion. So that's a great news in terms of new additional jobs in our community. So we'll move on to bylaws. It's been moved by Councillor Davey, seconded by Councillor Marsh, that leave be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed on the agenda, and that the same be taken as read a first time and stand referred to committee of the whole. All in favor? There's late starter. Okay, sorry. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have one late starter bylaw, zoning bylaw with respect to 62 Daniel Avenue.
Thank you. So with that, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Etherington that Council resolve itself into committee of the whole. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Etherington, if you want to click yourself on, please. Thank you. Hold on. Where's my mouse? There we go. Go ahead, Councillor Etherington.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I would call for a mover for the second reading of the bylaws. Call for a vote.
You need someone to move it.
Sorry. Moved by Councillor Singh. All in favour? Thank you. And then movers for each of the following items on the Committee of Whole agenda, the tenders, number one or two of them separately, Mr.
No, we've done those already. We've done the dog appeal, Mr. Chair.
We've done
so we're just down to sign variances under number 3.
Okay, just number 3. Do I have a mover for number 3?
I'll move it.
Everybody in favour? Anyone against? Don't you dare.
Move that the committee rise and report. You're doing all in favour now.
All in favour? Thank you. Trying to keep up with you guys.
Now you go to your line. You got it? Or do you want me to do it for you?
I have to introduce a motion moved by myself, seconded by
Councillor Schneider.
Councillor Schneider, as follows: that the proceedings and the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held this date as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes are hereby adopted and confirmed.
All in favour? Opposed? That's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Marsh, seconded by Councillor Davey, that the bylaws listed on the agenda for third reading be taken. Councillor Yanetsky.
Can we vote on bylaw part H separately, please? Recorded vote.
On which, sorry?
H, 14H. The one dealing with 751 Ottawa Street South.
You want to deal with it separately?
Please, record it.
Okay, we'll deal. Can someone tell us what that bylaw is? Okay, so you know we didn't deal with it separately in 11H.
No, that's only first reading. This is third reading.
Okay. We'll deal with 14H first. It's a zoning bylaw pertaining to okay. Ottawa and Strasbourg, that would be the A&W site. Okay, so we'll deal with that one first. Recorded vote has been requested. All those in favor? Councillor Galloway-Selak. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The balance of the bylaws for third reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And it's been moved by Councillor Marsh that we now adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Have a good evening.